U.S. foreign policy under Donald Trump has been defined by an America First agenda. But what does this mean in a world where the old centers of hegemonic power are shifting? This week on Upfront, I'll be speaking to renowned economist and director of Columbia University's Center for Sustainable Development, Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs, thanks so much for joining us on Upfront.
I'm delighted to be with you.
You said that we're now living in a multipolar world with major powers like Russia, China, India asserting their own influence, whether that's economic or political. You've also said that the U.S. sort of state is in decline. Can you explain why you think that is and how that's come to pass, where we have this new arrangement of power?
We have a new arrangement of power because these other parts of the world have made a lot of economic and technological progress. So China was a poor country 40 years ago. It is now a quite wealthy and technologically advanced country. I'd say it's at the cutting edge of many of the most important technologies. How did they get there? Very hard work, very high investment rates, very good strategy, serious planning. They thought ahead, they worked hard at it, and they were successful. This is the main fact. A second fact is a basic technological fact, which we kind of understood in the Cold War and kind of forgot after 1991, but it's a real truth every moment of our lives. And that is because of nuclear weapons and because other countries have a lot of them, we can't defeat those countries. So the world's intrinsically multipolar in the sense, don't mess with another nuclear superpower, it can really wreck your day. And we forgot that after 1991. Why 1991? That was the year that the Soviet Union dissolved into 15 states. And the American elite said, okay, now we really are all alone. We are the world's sole superpower. We treated Russia absolutely stupidly, abused our power, which was real, but abused it to the point where we ended up having a full-fledged war. It's in a way a proxy war in Ukraine, but it's a war between the United States and Russia, actually. It's not described that way in our press, but it is that way. And the point I'm making is you can't win a war like that because if you win, you lose. Russia has thousands of nuclear warheads. It's not going down. And if you lose on the battlefield with conventional, you lose again. Yeah. So this whole Ukraine adventure was forgetting that there was already intrinsically a multipolar world simply because there are multiple powers with many nuclear arms that can ruin your day, that can end up destroying our country and the world. So the fact of the matter is the United States is 4.1% of the world's population. We have 335 million people, approximately. The world is 8.1 billion people. There are a lot of other people. They don't see it the way that Washington sees it, that Washington runs the show. But I know Washington till this day has the delusion that they run the show.
Does that delusion make it hard for the United States to maintain its current footing or even? You've written about the U.S. belief in its need to dominate and the idea that historically the United States has seen itself as exceptional. In your book on American exceptionalism, which was published during the first Trump administration, you warned that this mindset was not only outdated but also dangerous. Are there any signs that the U.S.'s self-perception is shifting from the exceptionalist idea?
Yeah, it's a very good question. There are glimmers of hope. Our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said, and I nearly quote him, that we are now in a multipolar world. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. That is a very good statement. President Trump has said he can see President Putin's point of view that NATO should not enlarge to Ukraine. That is a very good statement. That is absolutely positive. I want him to recognize the same thing when it comes to the Middle East. I want the president to recognize the same thing when it comes to China. I want the president to make peace with Iran rather than following Bibi Netanyahu into some bombing mission against Iran. If those things happen, that would be the recognition that we have some limits, that we're in a multipolar world, and that we can't bomb our way out of it.
Jeffrey Sachs, thanks so much for joining me on Upfront.
Oh, really great to be with you.
Get back to your roots, to your...
When I announced this stream, speaking with Professor Zhang and Alexander Dugin, to be perfectly honest, it went all over Twitter, and people were saying, Sneeko is speaking to a CCP propagandist and a KGB propagandist. He's speaking to China and Russian spies. And they started saying, here they are to talk about how Western values are decaying.
Want when you try to get back to your roots, to your sources. Welcome to the Calvinist heretic group of the founding fathers. Your roots are rotten from the very beginning. So, and that demands to make some extravagant choices for you to join Catholicism, to join Islam, to join maybe Orthodox Church. So many.
What do you think are the main causes of the problems we see with American Western values right now? Maybe we could start with Professor Zhang.
Right. So I think the root of the problem is 1694. Because that is when the Bank of England was first chartered.
You have mentioned, for example, Libertas statue, but that is Hecate, the great goddess of the hell of the ancient Greeks.
Because America is a financial Ponzi scheme. It's $39 trillion in debt. And if people stop buying US treasuries, then America would collapse. There would be absolutely no way to finance the $39 trillion debt. You would have economic collapse, civil war, and so America right now is basically fighting for its life in Iran. So you can make the argument that America has no choice but to fight this war in Iran to prevent a Eurasian movement from arising.
All the traditionalists, we share this refusal of the Western modernity. So we can accept different traditions, but we consider the modernity to be absolutely wrong.
Right.
Atheism, pluralism, progressivism, enlightenment, all that things are totally evil.
He posts an AI image of himself with his face on Jesus, and he's putting his hand on what looks like to me, it looked like Jeffrey Epstein. And in the back, it looks like a Roman god, Libertas, the Statue of Liberty goddess. Some people are saying that that's Moloch flying in the sky, and that was also altered. What exactly are Western American values? How could that be described? Alexander Dugin, you, I think, accurately described it, and you spoke to what a lot of people are feeling right now, and that the modern Western values that we see, a lot of people are becoming disillusioned with. A lot of people are not happy with what they see.
The modernity to be anti-tradition. So modern world, it is not just development, not just progress, but quite opposite. That is decline. That is a fall.
The point is that it's the end of something. Whatever that religion is not going to continue. It just won't, because it's a lie. And so it will end, as all lies do. It will be revealed as a lie, as all lies are. And so you're watching the end of the global American empire, the unipolar world, that was great, by the way, while it lasted, but it's over. And you're watching the end of whatever American Protestant Christianity, one of the greatest and most positive forces in the history of this world, whatever it became after the Second World War, which is something unrecognizable. The point is that it's the end of something. Whatever that religion is not going to continue. It just won't, because it's a lie. And so it will end, as all lies do. It will be revealed as a lie.
Would be, who is this war really for? I'll come to that as well. We've seen how the war has taken a toll on the global economy, the ripple effects it has had. You've spoken about that extensively as well. We've seen also how effectively America has managed to fracture many relationships, especially with Europe. Do you see this as a shift towards a more multipolar world?
We are in a multipolar world. That exists, but the United States doesn't accept that. So the United States has been all bluster and bravado and bombs. Bluster, bravado, and bombs. That's pretty much it. And the result is that up until last night, it looked like they were going to blow up the whole world. I don't know exactly who got to Trump, but he pulled back at the last moment. So yes, we're in a multipolar world, and countries should understand that and behave that way.
The United States is on the edge of the radical collapse. So that is superpower, hyperpower that is collapsing. That is agony of it. And we need to understand that well. We should not be hypnotized by the real situation in the United States. They are in very, very bad situation, and hence they radical and extremist actions. So they have the problem with Epstein elite. They have the problem with economy. They have the great problem with the state of the moral in the United States. This is decaying society in the last stage of decay. So we need to follow that. We need to understand that. We need to study it. We need to have the correct, realistic understanding of what is going on in the United States of America outside of their propaganda, and maybe outside of our own propaganda. So we have to have a very correct, realistic understanding of American society, because from that depends almost everything in the world. So we need to try to reach the people of real MAGA, or the core MAGA, who share with us our general ideological, geopolitical, metaphysical vision of multipolarity, because the MAGA accepted multipolarity. Trump has betrayed MAGA and has thrown away multipolarity, has declared the war to multipolarity. So, but not MAGA. So we need to follow people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Alex Jones, Andrew Neapolitano, Larry Johnson, Hinkle, Jackson Hinkle, and great, absolutely great Kim.com that we should invite next time for our conference. He is very great. So we need to reach to these non-conformist MAGA people in the United States who have a very similar vision of what are the real priority to save America, to save the world, to save the West, to save the East, and so on. So we have immense amount of our friends in the United States of America. MAGA movement has made a rise of them. They help to them to reappear and to become important influencers, important power inside of American society. Now they are leading an anti-Israeli line, and that coincides geopolitically with our vision of things. So that is very important. So
you often speak of a global realignment and the decline of US unipolar dominance. What role do you believe the resistance in the Middle East plays in shaping this emerging multipolar world? And do you think they're given enough credit in Western leftist discourse?
Well, like I said earlier, the changing world order is economic, it's military, it's cultural, even faith-based, you know. So you can look at a myriad of factors. You can look at the rise of new military superpowers like Russia, of course, kind of rising from the ashes. You can look at the PLA in China and how powerful they are. You can look at what North Korea has become and how important they've become in military manufacturing, and also, as we've seen in Russia, how important they become in actually fighting on the front lines. Economically, you can look at BRICS and how they are trying to move away from the dollar and from Western financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, and offer a different alternative for the developing world. Culturally, of course, you can look at the surge of sovereign peoples in Africa who are asserting their own unique cultural values and saying we don't want Western NGOs forcing their propaganda from the Biden administration on us, or whatever it may be. But I think with the axes of resistance, it takes all of these things into account in different ways. Militarily, of course, it's obvious. I don't need to go into that one, how they have been a leading a domino, I guess, in the series of dominoes that are falling, that is really changing the world order. I think the one thing I'll say, though, from an outsider, it seems as though the economic interests in a lot of these countries in the Middle East, and the axes of resistance, excluding Yemen, are still very caught up in the Western order. I think there's a lot of oligarchs in these countries who have their money tied up in Western countries, Western financial institutions. I think Iran is a perfect example of that. And I love Iran, I love the Iranian people, I love the revolution. But at a certain point, if you don't free yourself economically, you're not going to be able to operate at all. Militarily, culturally, you're not going to be able to have any sovereignty in these realms. I think that Western leftists, do they give the axes of resistance enough credit? Western leftists, from what I'd see, and a lot of Western leftists are kind of liberal leftists. They're not real, like I'm a real leftist. Yeah. I'm a communist, I'm a Stalinist, I love Mao. All right, Professor Dugin, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm Jackson Hinkle, and this is Hazaldine Grayson Walker. And we really appreciated the kind words that you had to say about MAGA communism.
Yes, very interesting. I'm intrigued.
Yes.
From there, we respect those people who stand for the European traditions, but what the West has turned into, this is monstrous, this is aggressive, this is simply indecent, and that's ideology, that's ideology, that's civilization. Look at Epstein. That's who want to continue imposing it on the humankind. Of course, they'll have their place in the multipolar world, but we should pay less and less attention to what they do. Let them learn to find their place as well. The place is reserved for the West in the multipolar world, but it is their job to fill it with contents. And if they continue destroying the traditions of their own history, of the Greek and Roman sources, of the excellent humanistic tradition, but what they are doing today, that's just perversion. Cancel culture is a perversion. We thought things will go better with Trump, but it became even worse. What's happening with the West is just collapse. The West still has decent people, but we feel sorry for them. They seem like hostage of this time. Let the West get cured. Well, it is not the senior brother to anyone anymore. They cannot teach anyone anything. The further away we stand from the West, the less toxic we are. So the dialogue between those poles, what kind of global South are we talking about? Look at Russia. What kind of South are we? Islam exists in different parts. We must find some other term to describe non-West. The non-West is humankind, and the global South is just a part of it. So in my view, we must pay more attention to the philosophy of the multipolar world, to the dialogue between sovereign civilization states. If the West wants to take part in it, let them. Like always, in the myth, there is a round table of King Arthur, and there is an empty place for the West. If you come, you're very welcome to BRICS, you're welcome to the multipolar world. But if you behave the way you do, then the club of the big humankind will not let you in. The humankind.
Well, how very, very nice of Alexander Dugin to invite us, the global hegemon, to his world stage. I find that a little interesting. I'm Brian O'Shea. Welcome to Investigate Everything, and we're back, yes, and we're still talking about Dugin. Now, before we get there, I do want to say that there's been massive developments, and the blockading of the blockade by the Trump administration has actually pretty much given us a stranglehold on everything, and we'll get into that in just a second. I'm working my slides while I'm talking to you. But before we go into the Dugin Network and some of the background on it, what I do want to say is it's important to understand what I believe is the kind of like the grand strategy of the United States currently right now. And let me just pull up my notes here. But as a lot of people get their news from social media, all you hear is gloom and doom. You see everyone saying we're losing. Iran thinks they're winning. It's all propaganda. What can I say? I mean, it's all propaganda. The reason I say that is simply because in the real world, if you watch what's going on, if you read what's going on at the White House, but most importantly, if you watch what's happening in world markets, there's a shift towards the United States, a huge shift, because guess what? With the Strait of Hormuz closed, we pretty much are the place to go. We're the world's gas station now. Now, why do I say this? Well, there was a post that I heard about, and hat tip to Tim Pool for reading this a couple weeks ago, but I want to read it to you, and I will share the screen so you're not just staring at me. There we go. But there is a user out there named 10 Delta. Let me go ahead and share the screen. And if the air conditioning in the background is too loud, let me know. It's just very hot up here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is a guy named 10 Delta. I don't know who he is, but let me just read this strategy of his to you. 3 weeks ago, he says, I argued the U.S. goal in Iran is to seize the global oil spigot. Venezuela in January, Iran in February. Neutralize every supply channel outside the dollar system within 90 days. Achieve a compliant successor government and complete energy dominance. The oil thesis was the obvious layer. However, when you zoom out and view the last 4 years as a single sequence rather than isolated geopolitical events, the architecture of the grander U.S. plan becomes visible. First was Europe, which laid the groundwork. The Ukraine conflict provided the justification for sanctions that collapsed Russian pipeline gas from 150 billion cubic meters to 40. Then Nord Stream was destroyed, which rewired the entire European energy system permanently. The U.S. went from supplying 28% of Europe's liquid natural gas, or LNG, in 2021 to 58% by 2025, exporting a record 111 million MTs, metric tons, the first country in history to break 100 metric tons. Europe was transformed from a customer with options into a captive market, now purchasing its survival in USD. Second was Syria. The fall of Assad severed the critical node connecting China's Belt and Road Initiative to the Mediterranean. Trilateral railway linking Iran, Iraq, Syria, designed to bypass Western maritime choke points, was completely destroyed. This isolated Iran geopolitically and cleared the path for what came next. Third, Venezuela. In January, the U.S. effectively took control of the world's largest heavy crude reserves. The U.S. Gulf Coast has the most advanced refining complex on Earth, specifically built for heavy sour crude, which is all of Venezuela. Phillips 66, Valero, and the rest are now positioned to process hundreds of thousands of barrels of Venezuelan crude daily. The U.S. captured a massive strategic reserve and solidified its position as the dominant exporter of refined petroleum products, an industry worth $110 billion in 2025 alone. Venezuela and Iran were the two major oil supply channels that existed outside of the dollar system. Both produce heavy crude sold primarily to China and evaded U.S. financial supervision, but both now being neutralized within 90 days, which leads us to, fourth, is Iran and the Middle East energy shock. Israel struck Iran's South Pars gas field, the world's largest natural gas reservoir. Iran retaliated against Qatar's Ras Laffan, the single largest LNG facility on Earth, responsible for a fifth of global supply. Qatar Energy's own assessment is that 17% of the export capacity is gone, and recovery will take up to 5 years. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. European gas prices spiked to 70%. Asian spot prices doubled. The only remaining scaled supplier? The United States of America. If Iran falls and a successor government is installed that the U.S. controls or influences, the Delcy model described weeks ago, I'll have to pull that up, then roughly 40 to 45 million barrels a day of oil global production out of 103 million is effectively under the U.S. control. OPEC becomes irrelevant because the U.S. coalition is now the marginal producer. Now add the gas dimension, and it goes beyond oil. This war is solidifying the petrodollar system as it evolves into a hybrid petro-LNG dollar. So going from just the petrodollar to the LNG dollar, petro-LNG dollar. The global system was built on Saudi crude priced in USD, US dollars. The new system is built on American crude plus American gas from the Gulf Coast with no alternative supplier of comparable scale. The dependency is deeper because LNG infrastructure requires long-term contracts and regasification terminals that lock buyers into supply relationships for decades. Europe and the Pacific allies, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, etc., cannot pivot away as there is nowhere left to pivot. They're now locked into the U.S. energy system. The market confirms this. DXY went from 96 to 101. Gold is down 20%. Showing a strength in the dollar from its January all-time high. Bitcoin down 20% on the year. And just so you know, these are indicators of US dollar strength. So when they drop, US dollar goes up. That's why when the dollar is weak, you want to invest in gold and vice versa. Brent above 100. European and Asian institutions are liquefying precious metals and crypto to buy dollars because they need dollars to buy the only remaining scaled energy supply. The world is selling its gold to buy American energy in American currency. The dollar is now being weaponized through energy dependency. The structural repricing is happening regardless of how the conflict resolves. But the U.S. grand strategy goes deeper. Now, this is probably the most interesting part of this write-up. And again, this is an assessment, an analysis. But so far, and I'm going to talk to you about my analysis of this right after this. It's kind of right on track. Artificial intelligence is a physical industry. It runs on power and chips. Data centers require massive, uninterrupted baseload electricity, primarily provided by natural gas. Semiconductor fabrication requires helium and rare earths. Helium, by the way, and neon gas as well, both of which have huge reserves where? In Ukraine. By choking the Strait of Hormuz and crippling Middle Eastern LNG and helium production, the U.S. is systematically degrading China's ability to power its data centers and fabricate semiconductors at scale. The U.S. is energy self-sufficient, especially with newly captured Venezuelan reserves and expanding Gulf Coast capacity running on domestic gas. On the other hand, China is to import dependent, and every joule it imports effectively now transits choke points the U.S. Navy controls. Iran was the Belt and Roads overland energy bypass, the corridor that allowed China to mitigate the Malacca trap. With Iran neutralized, that corridor is severed. China faces a world where its compute infrastructure competes for scraps of depleted global LNG market, while American data centers run at full capacity on domestic energy. Russia is next in the sequence. A post-war Iran reopening under U.S. influence competes directly with Russia for the same refineries in China and India, but at a lower cost. Iran's production costs are lower. Russia loses its last structural advantage in heavy crude and its economic lifeline. Additionally, under the Iran war cover, Ukraine has been opportunistically destroying Russian energy infrastructure, and all signs point towards Russia being at the end of the line. The message from Washington becomes very simple. We dismantled 2 regimes in 3 months. Your economy is about to be crushed. Sign the Ukraine deal. Then Trump sits down with Xi, holding every card. Complete energy dominance. The hybrid petro-LNG dollar fortified, Iran cleared, Russia cornered, and China facing the Malacca trap, fully closed with no remaining energy bypass. Israel and the GCC are absorbing the kinetic cost of the conflict, whose primary beneficiary, counter to the mainstream narrative, is actually America first. Qatar, offline for 5 years, reprices the entire global gas market in favor of U.S. exporters for the remainder of the decade. The Gulf states face years of rebuilding. Europe faces its second energy crisis in 4 years. Sure, the average American might face some temporary moderate inflation and higher gas prices, but if you are the architect of the U.S. empire, you view rise of China and Chinese ASI as an existential winner-takes-all scenario. The collateral damage is an acceptable cost. Whoever controls the energy corridors controls the monetary systems. Whoever controls the monetary systems and the energy supply simultaneously controls the compute infrastructure that determines which civilization builds ASI first. The U.S. is seizing all 3. And that is hat tip to Tim Pool for reading that a couple weeks ago, and there are some updates to this that I've added. And this guy, 10 Delta, I don't know who this person is, so I can't vouch for it, but I did run some analysis against this scenario, and it checks out. We'll talk about that in a second. But first, let me say hello to my nice big audience. Nice to see everyone here. All right, let me go down through these. I don't read them all anymore because some of them I just don't get. But, you know, all right, Nettie Slabby, I will put you up there because you're here first. I have no idea what you're talking about. But welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. I really don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff there. I'm not going to put it all up. It's not bad. It's just this. I agree. There's a lot of liars in the world, of course, Nettie. Anyways, all right. So welcome to the show. Now let me call up my notes here. So as you're watching what happened with the Strait of Hormuz, I do believe the Trump administration pulled off something no one saw coming, and they kept it closed. Basically, they're sweeping it for mines, and they're not letting any Iranian or Chinese boats through. I think there was some announcement I saw that Trump might open it, but to be quite honest, I just haven't had a chance to research it. And as you guys know, you have to research every single headline these days. Okay, so with that in mind, let's say for a second that scenario by 10 Delta is what's happening. That is a grand strategy. It seems to be the case. Okay, let's say that's happening. Now let's talk about the multipolar network, or what I like to call the Dugin Network. I even made some slides for you. What is the Dugin Network? Well, we've talked about it. The Dugin Network, as I call it, is all of these influencers that kind of used to call themselves MAGA or MAGA adjacent and are suddenly anti-everything Trump does. Okay, and I did pick up that there's a pattern to it that really, really goes back to, I would say, the Biden administration. Okay, so what are we seeing? We're seeing people like Candace Owens. She doesn't really talk about geopolitics that much, but what I noticed she does is she slips them into her narratives about Charlie Kirk. Okay, and she's, of course, always going after Israel as the great evil whatever. That's part of the doctrine as well. You heard Dugin say there, and Dugin is the ideological base of this network. I want to say he's running it hands-on, but there's a lot of people pretty much quoting what he says. And I'm going to show you as many as I could fit into slides in a second. But there's a strategy there. So if you go back to that multipolar strategy, what is the multipolar strategy? The strategy of the multipolarists, kind of led by Russia, is to have a world where we all have our different spheres. Okay, we all have our different spheres of influence. Now, that'd be tempting if, I don't know, we weren't winning so much and we didn't have so much, but why would we? I mean, for that to happen, we would have to cede power to our enemies. Okay. So the way it looks in Dugin's world, which is actually he didn't invent it. It came from something called the Primakov doctrine. We all have our little regions. Okay. Russia has what they call their Eurasian area. China would have like the southern part of Asia and those areas. I forgot who has South America, Central America. I believe it was supposed to be Venezuela, could be Brazil. And then North America, we dominate our region. There's like 7 of them. I'll read them in a second. But that's all fine and good if we're all equally matched. If it's the Cold War, we can, kind of all equally wipe each other out. But I think what's happened here, and what's really, really pissing the Duginites off, is that they really thought they had control of Donald Trump. Why did they think this? Well, I'll tell you why. Because a lot of the influencers that you've seen Donald Trump go after them specifically. They were very close to Donald Trump. Big, huge names, big supporters. And I'm sure the Duginites were thinking, we got it. We got all our best people around Trump. He's going to do what we say. He's going to follow the multipolarity. And he didn't. He had plans of his own. And those plans were a unipolar world, as we have now, and strengthening it so it lasts forever. And with this energy kind of dominance, it can. Okay, now a lot of people might say that's imperialism. It's not. And a lot of people might say that's wrong. People should live and let live. In a perfect world, I agree. But the fact of the matter is, people don't. The fact of the matter is, people with dominance over regions lean on them. Iran is no stranger to that, and the U.S. has done that in certain respects too. I'm not going to play whataboutery, but just to get in front of the people that do, sure. So there's always a global hegemon, always. And I just would say, I'd rather it be us than any of those other countries. Okay, we may not be perfect, but I think history has shown when it comes to basic civil liberties, human rights, I don't care what you think about this country, it's better than any other country out there. If someone brings up Sweden, I would say go buy a piece of pizza over there and get back to me. Okay, which means it's like $15 a slice. So the point is, that's the vision I see. That's the vision that 10 Delta there sees, and I tend to agree with it. It seems like we're going that way, and I am all about it. Because again, you see, if part of that plan works out, it kind of forces a Russia-Ukraine peace deal. If it works out with China, it really does force China to start playing fair in the global stage of markets and industry. And don't forget, China has plans of their own for global domination by 2049. We're getting in front of that really quickly. Okay, so that's the plan as I see it. But as I said, the people pushing this multipolar strategy are losing their minds because they're watching it slip away. And I don't know, I just call it a kind of a loser strategy. That'd be like, well, the irony of it is that even the Duginites, they look down on communism. They look down on the liberal left for a lot of good reasons that I agree with. But one of the biggest key words that came out of the liberal left was, you might remember it, equity. Equity. What was equity? Well, equality is everyone goes into the contest with the same level playing field. Equity means no matter how they go in, they all come out the same. So basically, an example of equity, if you don't know, I'm sure you do, would be something like we all go to work at the same time, and but we all don't work the same amount of effort. But at the end of the day, we all get paid the same. Or we all bust our butts to get into school, get good grades, but then some people just get let in. And then no matter how hard you work, we all come out with the same report card. Those are some basic, examples. In the multipolar world, what they want is for us to have done all this work to gain the dominance we have, to pull Europe's fat out of the fire and China's multiple times. But then we have to give it all to them so everyone has an equal share of power. Well, no, it doesn't work that way, and they should know better. But it's and it is a trap. Okay, it's certainly a trap, because if you think about it, if you think about a multipolar world, what is that? A multipolar world is essentially our enemies. We give them all the same amount of power that we do. So if you think about the poles, right, in that, the poles are essentially Iran, well, not anymore. Iran, China, Russia, United States, maybe Venezuela, maybe Brazil, Turkey, possibly. And those are really key concerns, because I just don't see those countries just leaving us alone. Okay, certainly not. Every empire, China pretty much has said they want to dominate the world by 2049. It's something called the China Rejuvenation, which is good for them, bad for everyone else. They want to be the global hegemon that everyone turns to, and they want to be the leader. Okay, and they've made it clear. It's interesting about the multipolar world because China is kind of seen as being part of that conversation. But in reality, China would never go for that either, because why would they? Okay, so I could see them, let's say we were dumb enough to go for the multipolar world. I could see China turning around and saying, okay, pulling a Bane on them and saying, okay, now all this is ours, and everyone going, wow, what are you talking about? That's what I would see happening. So, yeah, that's where we're at with that. But I want to really get into where this multipolarity comes from. Now, before I start reading what I prepared, I'll save my comments for afterwards, but I do have my thoughts on this, and I want to share them because I can see why people bought into this. I can certainly see why they bought into this. Let's just put it this way. When Biden was in office, especially with a brief interlude with Donald Trump's first 4 years, and then preceded by Obama and even Bush, I could see where people in this country, especially conservatives, I am conservative, start saying, man, we're never going to get out of this. The Democrats are going to always steal elections. We're going to be stuck under these globalists, or as the Duginites call them, Atlanticists. And we're going to be stuck in this horrible world where there's, forced transition surgery, whatever. And, I could see if people give up hope and say, yeah, we're done, we're cooked, America's finished, saying, well, maybe we should empower Russia to force a multipolar world on us to keep our liberal, left-wing, evil Biden government in check. I could see that. I want to go for that because I know a lot about Russia, but I would say that I think that's where a lot of people had that idea. There's also a religious aspect to it. A lot of the stuff that comes out of the multipolar, like Dugin type talk, is a lot of traditionalism, a lot of returning to, traditional values. Yeah, I'm all for that. But the point, in my opinion, of America is that should be your choice. It shouldn't be forced on you. You shouldn't force anything on children. I don't like a lot of liberal views and a lot of things they do. But, I've always was raised thinking the point of America is to have that freedom of choice. And if a grown man wants to be a grown woman once he turns 18, then be my guest. I'm not going to just leave the children alone. So, that's where I'm at with that. But it doesn't seem to give a choice for that. And to me, it does it does feel like a trap, because why would Russia want what's best for the United States? You hear the way they talk about us when different audiences are out there. I mean, if you hear Dugin on like an English language interview, he's kind of likable, like kind of like the befuddled old grandfather with deep wisdom. He seems to be a very smart guy. But Russia wants what's best for Russia. Every country wants what's best for every country. And every country that focuses on themselves, they tend to do better than most. Where we got ourselves in trouble was not focusing on us. And what I see Trump doing is focusing on this country, and the people that thought we were dumb enough to buy into this multipolarity are pissed. And so are the other competing networks. It's not just the Duginites. You have the Soros Open Societies Network. That constitutes most of Europe, most of the liberal left. Okay, and what they want is a borderless world that's kind of, I don't know, like run by a global bureaucracy or something, and we all get along and live and let live. But again, there's no freedom there, because you're being forced into other people's cultures and value systems that may not be your own. Okay, you're being forced to accept people that you normally wouldn't accept into your country. Okay, you're being forced to accept things that may go against your moral compass or your religious compass. And so the way I see being the hyperpower, if you will, is that one thing America always has let people do is have that choice. That's how we got there. That's how we got so many crazy liberal policies, is we do have that choice. We just have to find a way to balance choice and management of choices, but so they don't hurt society. I always say just follow the law, you'll be good. But we got to keep people from changing the law. But that's a whole nother show. All right, so I see a couple people, bipolar. And Christopher Johnson, we claim other countries want power to justify us gaining even more power. China and Russia just wants to. No, that's actually, I totally disagree with you. Just read, I would just say, just go to MOFA, just read all of Xi Jinping's books. And just look at their record. To say that Russia and China don't want power, then explain the Soviet Union. Okay, explain Georgia, explain, Chechnya, explain Ukraine. Yes, I know, I think we goaded them into it with the Obama administration. But to sit there, Christopher, and I hate to call you out like this, and think the rest of the world doesn't want to expand, I think that is just historically naive. World history has shown that every power wants to expand, no matter who they are. And the thing is, we're not taking land. That's the difference. We're taking control of the one thing that countries have used to leverage good and bad things on other countries. Okay? And if you don't think China wants to expand, then you really need to understand how the Belt and Road works. That is financial colonialism, and it's toxic financing at its core. Okay? Why do you think Spain accepted just out of the blue in 2024, suddenly said, I think it was in March or April, that, we see Palestine as a state? Where did that come from? You know where that came from? Well, they got several billions from the Chinese for their infrastructure, because Spain's one of the strongest components of the Belt and Road in Europe. So to say other countries, only the U.S. wants to expand, is just, I'm sorry, that's historically naive. I've studied China for a long time, Russia less, but even so. And also, don't even think of like countries. Think of like what is happening with communism in the world today. Okay, trying to spread like wildfire. For instance, even in this country, there's more communist active organizations operating than ever before. The Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Democratic Socialists of America. These are communist parties who have stated flatly they want to take over our system. They want a global communist type of empire. They want communism everywhere. They want to spread too. What is China? Supposedly a communist country. So no, they don't. They do want to spread. We want to spread to, look, I think the best defense is an offense. I focus on vaccines. I have not trusted vaccines for almost 30 years. And behavior, it's easy to control people. Or brain damage, one of the Trumps mentioned neurologically insane people. Capitalism is the only system that works. I agree with you. And you live in communist Japan. Well, good thing is that Japan is part of the big plan. But yeah, I hear you. Okay, so this is from Tablet Magazine. Take it with a grain of salt. Take anything with a grain of salt. But we're going to talk about multipolarity. And this is a really good article, came out not too long ago. I will put it up on the screen so you don't have to just stare at my head. Here we go. All right, add it to the stage. Okay. All right. And see, this is where it gets very, very frustrating for me and exhausting for me, is in this day and age, I feel like I'm fighting people that I was aligned with just 2 years ago against this multipolarity. So let's go through it. On Sunday, playwright Jonathan Leaf published an essay in Substack identifying an acquaintance whom he suspects of working for the Iranian government. This person is an American-born intellectual who comes from an Iranian immigrant family and advanced degrees. Okay, in advanced degrees intellectual, who currently works for an obscure institute that claims to be in the business of promoting peace and diplomatic solutions to world affairs. Invariably, this intellectual, quote, uses a single word to describe his thinking: multipolarity, which means that, quote, the U.S. role in the world should be diminished and Russia, China, and Iran should be given more latitude to pursue their foreign policy ambitions. While he refrains from criticizing these authoritarian powers, he believes that the United States is weak and in decline. Sound familiar? And has lately taken to arguing that it is losing the Iran war, quote, rather badly. Leaf, like his quote-unquote friend, interpersonally but suspects Leaf likes his friend interpersonally, but suspects he may be a paid agent of a foreign government. Certainly such an arrangement would not be unheard of. In September of 2023, Semaphore revealed the several high-profile Iranian diaspora intellectuals had been secretly coordinating with the Islamic Republic's foreign ministry in order to promote Iranian interest in the West. And indeed, Leaf's description immediately called to mind Arta Moini, an Iranian-American intellectual whom the Scroll had seen as last year's National Conservative Conference. There, Moini had given a talk on America in a multipolar world, casting President Trump as the champion of realism and multipolarity against the globalist blob of Washington, D.C. Moini had warned that the world was returning to its, quote, natural condition of sovereign civilized powers, balancing one another, attempting to resist this trajectory, she claimed, would lead the United States to ruin. At the time, this struck us as a strange argument to make at a nominally America First conference. Multipolarity, after all, was originally conceived by the Russian intelligence services as a tool to weaken the West. It was first formulated by Yevgeny Primakov, a KGB Arabist who served as foreign minister under Russian President Boris Yeltsin, and has since been popularized internationally by the state-backed Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin. In essence, multipolarity opposes a unipolar United States dominance in favor of an arrangement in which Russia and its allies, China and Iran, are granted freedom of action in their respective spheres of influence. Over time, the idea has worked its way into the propaganda of China and Iran and the arguments of their Western sympathizers. While phrased as an essentially defensive arrangement against American globalism, multipolarity is, in practice, a strategy for communist Islamist world domination. U.S. grand strategy since World War II is premised on the idea of forward defense in the Eurasian rimland, which runs from the continental Europe to the Middle East and onto the coastal Asia. and which is home to most of the world's people and economic activity. Without control of the rimland, presently secured by a combination of U.S. naval power and Washington's system of alliances, the United States would become a second-tier hemispheric power. For elements of the isolationist right, the appeal of being a hemispheric power in a multipolar world is no doubt that it would rule out further U.S. military entanglements in far-flung locations while allowing us to shed the costs of maintaining our empire. But exchanging lucrative economic and defensive partnerships with Europe, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and Israel for stronger relations with El Salvador and Peru is hardly a recipe for increasing American military power or national wealth. Instead, it would be the greatest cell phone in the history of geopolitics, a recipe for making America radically poorer and less secure, and therefore subject to the dictates of more powerful countries like China, which one suspects is the point. Moini certainly fits Leif's description. He has an impressive array of intellectual credentials, including a PhD from Georgetown University. He works for an obscure institute, the Canada-based Institute for Peace and Diplomacy, the adversary board of which includes a member of the Qatari royal family, and Wenran Jiang, a Canadian professor alleged to have acted as an influence agent for the Chinese telecom giant Huawei. He invariably discusses multipolarity, and while he has produced reams of criticism of the joint U.S.-Israeli campaign against Iran as a massive blunder, another keyword to write down, massive blunder, he has also written elaborate Friedrich Nietzsche-inflected essays casting Russia's four-year quagmire in Ukraine as a geopolitical triumph over liberal Europe. His writing tends to appear in whatever publication employs Sohrab Ahmari at any time. To be clear, there is no evidence that Moini is an Iranian agent. We can only say that Leif suspects that a man whom we suspect to be Moini might be. Still, it is curious that an intellectual who consistently supported the Russian-Iranian-Chinese line to the extent of importing KGB phraseology into his analysis is not only speaking at influential MAGA-aligned conferences, but also receiving fellowships from relatively mainstream American conservative institutions like Hillsdale College and the Claremont Institute. What gives? We might find some clues in Central Europe. Okay, so I am going to let you read the rest. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but let me just read the summary because that will get boring. Yeah, so that's basically, hold on. There we go. And then we get into the MAGA people that are involved and everything like this. But this is the one thing that you may notice with this is a lot of the people are people that a lot of us love and kind of trust or used to. But the way I see it, if the president starts doing things that you don't agree with and you start really working hard, like we've seen Alex Jones doing, to undermine him, and then you always caveat it with saying, I'm just trying to knock him onto the right path. Well, I'm sorry, Alex Jones. I trust Donald Trump in office much more than I trust you to make the decision to knock him onto the right path. Not to mention Alex Jones has been going to Russia and speaking at their conferences with Dugin since 2016. All right, so that is the tablet magazine, but the basic trap, you see it. It's like we would be relegated to this side of the world, which has far fewer powerful economies than the other spheres, which would knock us way back in line. And I'm sorry, but most countries have long memories. I don't see them leaving us alone and saying, Kumbaya, the world's a happy place. And for those people who think that, as Chris claimed, that China and Russia just want to grow, you should see the doubling of China's military spending since 2021. It's doubled. It's huge. Turkey's as well. All right, so that's the trap, and I believe that's what we're fighting. One of the many things we're fighting against. So let's talk about these spheres of influence. Here we go. Okay, so get my notes. Okay, so Basically, this is all based on the Dugin's is based on the Primakov doctrine. I'm going to read some of this to you, not the whole thing, just my analysis of it. Okay. So the Primakov doctrine, basically Western analysts have usually overemphasized this as the Gerasimov doctrine, the 2013 idea of hybrid warfare that blurs peace and war, combining hard and soft power in permanent conflict, as the guiding principle of Russian strategy. In reality, Russia's foreign and defense policy has been driven for 2 decades by the Primakov doctrine, which is essentially what Dugin is talking about with multipolarity, named after the former foreign minister, Primakov. Gerasimov concept is merely an operational tool to support the real strategic doctrine. The Primakov doctrine views U.S.-led unipolarity as unacceptable and calls for a multipolar world managed by a quote-unquote concert of major powers, with Russia as an indispensable player. The key pillars, and these are important, of the Primakov doctrine are Russia's primacy in the post-Soviet space and pursuit of a Eurasian integration, opposition to NATO expansion, strategic partnership with China, active resistance to U.S. unilateralism. Okay, and I'll let you go into the history of it yourself, but there are many times where Russia has used a mix of tools, military hard power, and the essential foundation as an enabler, with the hybrid non-military tools of information warfare, influence warfare, like we're seeing now, diplomacy as risk management supplements, which then direct for they're cheaper too that way. Hard power always looms in the background. Hard power, boots on the ground, it always has its consequences. So the Carnegie Institute did a big write-up on the Primakov doctrine, where I based some of this analysis and some other sources, but some examples of where they've tried this out, the doctrine. Syria 2015 intervention. Russia's military intervention saved the Assad regime, established Moscow as a major Middle East player, and created a permanent Mediterranean naval air presence, and checked U.S. influence. It was a low-risk, high-reward option, mostly air power, no large ground commitment. Hybrid tools had limited value in the sectarian civil war. In Georgia 2008, you may recall that one, and the Ukraine-Crimea conflict. Swift use of combined hard and hybrid power to assert dominance in the post-Soviet space and block NATO enlargement. And by the way, I'm all for blocking NATO enlargement. I don't even like NATO. And that's the tough thing about this, too. It's like some of these things you can get behind. I just don't like the end result of it. Broader efforts. Opposition to the U.S. invasion of Iraq, 2003. Military buildups along NATO's borders. We saw that from 2014 on. The reasons why are arguable. And deepening ties with China to constrain American power. Okay, so that's the Primakov doctrine analysis. But basically that is, consider that the kind of base of Dugin. And who is Dugin? Okay. Well, basically, Dugin took a lot from the Primakov doctrine, and then he made it popular. So Alexander Dugin, he's a leading neo-Eurasianist philosopher and author of Foundations of Geopolitics, 1997. I have a link in the description for you. You can't buy it on Amazon. It did get banned by the Biden administration. And the theory of the multipolar world. He shares the core goal of multipolarity, but frames it as a deeper ideological, civilizational, and geopolitical project. And you'll see that when he speaks about it a lot. It's always, it's about values and all this. His vision is not primarily about diplomatic concerts among states, but about a world of distinct civilizational poles, large spaces, or empires that reject liberal Atlanticism or globalism. U.S. Anglo-American sea power dominance, globalization, and universal liberalism. That's what they're fighting against. Russia leads the Eurasian heartland pole in an existential struggle against the Atlanticist unipolar order. Okay. And so the key features of what's being pushed by these influencers come from this right here. This is the Dugin multipolarity. Civilizational multipolarity. Poles are defined by culture, tradition, and geopolitics. For example, Eurasian, Russian-led bloc, potential alliances with China, India, Iran, and even reoriented Germany or Japan. Not just Soviets, not just sovereign states. Dugin draws on classical geopolitics, Mackinder, Hofshofer, and Schmidt, and his fourth political theory, anti-liberal synthesis of ideas against Western modernity. See, the problem I have, many of them, but the problem I have with this is its entire thrust against the United States is based on, their feelings towards liberals in the United States who really, really, showed what they are all about during the Biden administration. That's where a lot of these ideas got popular in the West, even with some of our friends and family, because we saw the Russians and, the Dugins as, kind of on the same side of the battle with us. Okay, like we're all fighting those liberal crazy ideas, and those ideas need to be fought still. They're terrible and anti-American. However, I feel when I read his theories on what the world should look like, his take on multipolarity, it's based on the idea that America is run by liberals, and in my opinion, it's not, because we got Donald Trump back in. If we don't get off our asses and keep fighting that back, they will run it again. And I almost think that people that follow Dugin and Dugin himself and Putin to some degree, even though he doesn't do everything Dugin prescribes, he does have Dugin does have a lot of influence on Russian foreign policy, and that's demonstrable in the policies they adopt. Now, it could be Primakov, but, Dugin is very well connected. His books are even taught at some of the military colleges in Russia. They also they also talk about Eurasianism as a strategy. Russia must build a continental bloc from Dublin to Vladivostok in extreme formulation, through axis like Moscow-Berlin, Moscow-Tehran, Moscow-Tokyo. Common enemy Atlanticism, globalists, unites them. Multipolarity requires active disruption of unipolar structures. That would be us. And then the last bullet is ideological intensity. Multipolarity is not just balance of power politics. It is anti-globalist, traditionalist, and often mystical, occult tinged. It envisions quote-unquote empires of many empires, where sovereignty and civilization and hierarchical, not Western liberal. So there you get an idea for it. So let me see. The key differences, don't need to go into those. I took a lot of notes. I've been writing this for a couple weeks now. All right, so now we're going to go into, I'm going to put my very bad slides up here. Give me a second. Okay. It's been so long since I've used PowerPoint. Bear with me. Let me see, view. Okay, I hope this works. Nope. Sorry, guys. All right. So I'll talk while I'm doing this. Let me look at the comments. NATO is evil. I think people are evil, not organizations, but I do agree with you that NATO has expansionist ideas of its own. I think NATO is the tool of the George Soros Open Society networks, which is definitely one of the side-by-side comparisons that I've shown, that I show as, one of the big battles we're fighting. And let me explain this. It's confusing for even me, because I was never trained to fight these kind of battles, just like nobody was. But I don't know. I've lost my screen. Okay, there we go. But yes, it is confusing. There we go. Phew. Okay. Oh, that was scary. It's confusing because even I was like, okay, that's Chinese influence, all through COVID, and some of the things we saw coming from the left definitely had a Chinese flavor to them, right? And then you had this latest thing pop up where I'm thinking, okay, this is the MAGA communists. This is like the infiltrators, kind of like the infiltrators that Stalin put into 1948 Czechoslovakia. It must be them. Okay. And then it just became like, what is this? And then when I finally landed on Dugin, I'm like, oh, this makes sense. And then I started comparing the Dugin ideology to like the Soros ideology. And what I came up with was, they're almost the same. They're basically competing networks. Okay. And I feel, and I call this the influence wars, because I do feel like they are fighting for, world dominance this way. Okay, I'm going to stop messing with the slideshow, guys. Sorry. It's killing me. They're trying to control reality. So the Soros people, they have a vision of the world, and then the Dugin people, they have a vision of the world. Okay, I found it. Thank God. And we'll get in. We got into those views on the last one, but basically the competing networks are this. You got the Open Society Soros people. That's most of Western Europe, and liberals in America that lean more towards globalist type tendencies. You might have heard your liberal friends say, I'm a citizen of the world. They tend to be Soros leaning people, to the point where my neighbor gave me a copy of the Homo Deus and all these, I forgot the guy's, Harari, the globalist guy. And I was like, yeah, thanks, bro. Like, it was nice of him to give me that, but it was like he was giving me that as if, and I've read them, but like as if I was going to learn something from them. So that's how they think. They think it should be a borderless world. These are the people that advocated for open borders. This is all the Soros network. I mean, that is the big money on the top of it. Man. Okay. I'm just going to have to restart. Sorry, guys. I'm just going to have to restart this this application. Bear with me. So, and then you have other state networks. You have the U.S. has their own, we have our own covert influence type networks. But they're all basically tiered the same. And they're tiered in a 4-tier type strategy, which my slides will show you as soon as I can get them up. And I do apologize. There we go. Because, yeah, I know an error occurred. No kidding. Okay. Embarrassing. All right. Well, we'll have to do the slides another time. Damn. So proud of those. Close that. Maybe that will help. Okay. Yeah, replace it. I'm going to cry. All right. So let's just open up the old one. I got it. Cancel and then out. Yeah, sure. Yep. Nope. Thanks for bearing with me on this. That's the fun of late night shows. I think you guys have come to expect it. So those are your competing networks. Okay. Now let me show you what the Dugin network looks like. Here we go. Oh my God. All right. My slides are all messed up. Let me just change something here so you could actually read them. He's going to cry. And background, we'll just make it. Okay, sorry guys. Let me just get this done here. Solid fill, there we go. Yeah, anyways, I don't know what happened. My slides got all messed up. That's really terrible. Really terrible. Here we go. This will work. Okay, good. Okay, so what I did, let me share this with you. I went ahead and I'm going to share a screen here. Okay. We're getting to it. There we go. Okay, good. That'll have to work. All right, you get to see the whole thing because I don't want to mess my slide up. My slideshow is acting up. Right, so here's what I came up with. I did a search of all profiles that had 75 to 100K followers using ethnic cleansing, war crimes by Israel, anti-Semitic, blah, blah, blah. And then what I found was they all make claims like Mossad vassal, Israeli puppet, state under Mossad assets, Netanyahu's puppet. These are the common, themes that they're using. They all have regularly made references to Mossad calling the shots in the U.S. foreign policy, Israeli lobbying, bypassing U.S. intelligence, and Iran conflict serving the greater Israel theory and Israeli interests at U.S. expense. Now, if you followed along with the grand strategy, I think I've always thought that when people thought Donald Trump and our entire apparatus was doing what the Israelis wanted, I thought that was just stupid. A lot of people argue, oh, well, all the lobbying money, they have to do what they say. Well, I got news for you. Israel spends less money on lobbying than the Bahamas and the Marshall Islands. So look it up. Here's the people. So based on these keywords and all kind of parroting at the same time, what I came up with was the ones that have millions of followers are Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, Megyn Kelly, Andrew Tate, Ian Carroll, Sean Ryan. And again, using these type of tropes here. And there's far more than this. Hundreds of thousands of followers, Ian Schaefer, Ryan Matta, Stu Peters, Nicholas Fuentes, Jackson Hinkle, Jeremy Corbyn, Darrell Cooper. He's the guy that is supposedly the historian that Tucker Carlson not on. Whitney Webb, we'll get into her in a second because I like Whitney Webb, but I'll explain to you why she's here. And then 75 to 100,000 followers. Apocalypsios, this guy Adam, I'm sure you've seen him before. I'll put him up at the end of this. Iranian Force, Max Blumenthal, who's also the Gray Zone. Okay, and then the Middle East Eye, Noah's Ark, you get the idea. So the way the networks are set up, and then here's more of them here. The way these networks are set up is like this. There's 4 tiers in this network. Tier 1, originators. These are your kind of like content makers, big book makers, like people that write big books on the Epstein files or 9/11 as a hoax, these kind of things. They become your originators. That's the content that the rest of the network draws from. Then you have your tier 2, which are synthesizers and popularizers. An example in this network would be like Ian Carroll. He'll take pre-existing work of others in the tiers, and he'll amplify it and make very trendy videos that get millions of views. He actually started on TikTok. And then there's legitimizers and bridge figures, who I think are the most important people in the networks. Those would be your Tucker Carlsons, your Glenn Greenwalds, your Sean Ryans, your Joe Kents. They're taking some fringe ideas and making them legitimate. Okay. And then tier 4 amplifiers. Now, tier 4, a lot of them are unwitting because a lot of people get rolled up in it. So an amplifier is taking retweeting, doing short emotionally charged videos, and memes and that sort of thing. Nick Fuentes has an army of these people. A lot of these people do. Candace Owens does. They're not all bad. They just believe them. Okay. And some don't. Some just go along with it to be part of something. And then unfortunately, my good slides are gone, but I had more detail on that network. But let me show you how it passes through. And let me just say, this is how all influence networks are structured, whether it's U.S. government, Russian government, Iranian, the axis of resistance. Marketing and covert influence are pretty much the same thing. So you see it like a marketing plan. It's basically structured the same way, where you'll have your body of research. Okay, that'd be your originator. Then you have your kind of splashy marketing firm that makes the commercials and the short videos and some of the organic marketing infomercials. That would be your synthesizers. Then you have your bridgers and your legitimizers in a marketing campaign. That would be like the dentist who's recommending a toothbrush, or the athlete who's representing a sports drink. So like that. And then you have your amplifiers, and those are the people that are promoting the products online, putting stickers on telephone poles. That's a basic view of it, but it's the same thing across all networks like that. Now, what's interesting about this particular network, which I call the Dugin Network, is that they tend to, I compared them to my knowledge of covert influence propaganda networks from my past work. And I've got to say, of all the networks, they look the most like a Russian network. I'm going to share my other screen with you because, so basically the way this network is structured, it's decentralized. I'll share this with you here. Okay, so you can follow along. This is just my write-up, but I will get into a better type of format for you. But for now, this is what we got. Okay. So the Dugin Network, it's decentralized but ideologically coherent network of ex-influencers who promote narratives of Israeli Mossad influence over the U.S. foreign policy, especially with the Iran conflict, Israel first, sarcastic framing, Epstein-Mossad blackmail networks, multipolarity, anti-interventionism. These are the common core themes of the Dugin Network. The network follows a clear tiered structure and shows strong thematic and timing alignment with Russian and Iranian state messaging, and we've all seen that, with Dugin serving kind of as the ideological catalyst, okay? And the more you listen to Dugin, I recommend you do, the more the things are going to sound really familiar to you. So the Tier 1 originators, foundational research and core narratives: Whitney Webb, Dropsite News, and Ryan Grimm. Antiwar.com, who actually attacked me on X when I started talking about this stuff, Max Blumenthal and the Gray Zone, and Mint Press News. Okay, and all these people have worked for one another. Ryan Grimm used to work on The Hill, or at The Hill, alongside one Kim Iverson, who I'm not quite sure which network she fits into. Antiwar.com, just go check out the website, it says it all. Max Blumenthal, the son of Sidney Blumenthal, who was Hillary Clinton's closest advisor. Max Blumenthal has been on this anti-Israel hatred fest forever. But he formed the Gray Zone, which is Gray Zone News, which has even at one time employed Kai Pritzker, who's J.B. Pritzker's nephew, and then Mint Press News. So these will put out seemingly legit type of stuff. And look, Whitney Webb, she writes huge books on things, and I haven't researched Whitney Webb. I'm not saying she's working for Dugin or anything. I will say this. You can be unwitting or witting. So like, for instance, if Whitney Webb is just interested in writing about the Epstein files and what she believes is a network of blackmail, and not intending this to be weaponized, she's just putting out research. That happens on all sides of the aisle. Like on the left, for instance, look at the way science research was weaponized. So I am not saying Whitney Webb is a witting member of this network. I will say, definitely would say Ryan Grimm, in my opinion, because I don't know for sure, they make their views clear. Same with Max Blumenthal, same with antiwar.com, same with Mint Press News. Okay, they know who they're working for. They know what message they want you to receive and accept. I will say Whitney Webb is written for Mint Press, but again, I'm kind of like, jury is still out on that one. Tier 2 are the synthesizers in this network, the long form connectors. Like I said, they make the viral videos. They have the news platforms that really hook people in, make it a more tangible thing. I fit Ian Carroll, Daryl Cooper, and Glenn Greenwald into that category. You'll also notice some people kind of transcend different tiers. Okay. Legitimizers and bridge figures. Now, we've all seen this. We've all seen, and I've seen the comments online, people like they're all platforming each other. Yes. Credible voices lending mainstream reach. Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Joe Kent, John Kariakou, the ex-CIA guy who ratted out other CIA guys and put them in danger. I can't stand him. Sean Ryan, he's a real disappointment, but he's become a big legitimizer. George Galloway from the UK. He's openly a Marxist, which blows my mind. But he's a big show, and he's gets people on and reaches a wider audience. So that's where the bridge comes in. Jeremy Corbyn, same thing. And here you see Glenn Greenwald again, because I see him as a bridge figure, because he kind of comes from the left and kind of straddles both camps. So he can reach center left, center right, and beyond. And he's been on the same vein as these. And by the way, if this goes dark, we're having a hell of a storm outside. You can probably hear it. So that's what happened. It's really coming down. I'm up in the Hudson Valley in New York right now. And Saida Warsi. Then amplifiers, high volume spreaders, Alex Jones, Max Blumenthal, Stu Peters, Candace Owens, Elijah Safer, Ryan Matta, Jackson Hinkle, Nick Fuentes, Andrew Tate, Viva Fry, and the lower follower accounts that we mentioned earlier. Key messaging themes in this network: Israel first policy criticism, Epstein-Mossad blackmail intelligence networks, broader anti-Israel criticism in varying degrees of intensities across tiers, multipolarity, and anti-interventionism. Okay, so here is where I did the research on this. The strongest alignment in terms of structure, it aligns almost perfectly with Russian government type influence networks. Okay, and I'll post some examples of these. Kind of Iranian government, but that would make sense because there's a lot of historical Russian influence on those networks. Weaker leanings towards the Chinese and the Brazilian governments, because they kind of have a different view of multipolarity, and they're not really playing the MAGA game. U.S. model is least similar. I can attest to that. I just can't go into detail, but the U.S. network, and I would even say the Donald Trump's America First network of influence, tends to be more organic, tends to be more positive, focuses on organic values. So you don't even, it tends to amplify the positive things about the country by design. Okay. So that's that. So Dugin's role in the network, he acts as a strategic ideological catalyst. His concepts of multipolarity, fourth political theory, and anti-Atlanticism provide intellectual coherence. The strongest vector for him into the country would be Jackson Hinkle, who's the founder of MAGA communism, alongside Haz al-Din. You saw Jackson Hinkle earlier. By all accounts, I can tell this guy's living in Russia. He actually used to be a lefty surfer guy too. That's the crazy part. Now he's like the MAGA communism founder of the American Communist Party as of 2024. Okay. And you heard him say it. He's a Maoist. He's a Marxist. And conservatives are platforming this guy. His views on Trump. Dugin used to praise Trump and brag about having these MAGA core individuals. His views on Trump, if you watch, have shifted dramatically. Now he hates Trump. Between 2024 and early 2025, and even past into March, he is pissed. Outright criticism to this day. Okay, so these are the key events and coordinated network responses. What does that mean? That means what I did is I looked for key events to see how these people were all messaging. This is how I came up with this network. Now, caveat, okay? I'm not saying for a fact these guys are a coordinated network. What I am saying is it seems coordinated, at least at the tier 1, 2, and 3 level. Okay? The tier 4 level, the amplifiers, they can be organic or they can be, part of the original, but you could tell. I mean, there's some key things you could tell with. Like, for instance, if all of a sudden someone who was pretty middle of the road on politics is all of a sudden like, I hate this and all that kind of stuff, they're probably getting paid. Okay, they're probably getting paid. We can go into how that works another time. I can tell you how it works. It basically, there's a lot of law firms involved. There's a lot of marketing firms, mainly marketing firms. So you're never going to find FARA type things on these people because they're probably working alongside marketing firms based in the U.S. So the key events I checked against were Charlie Kirk assassination, Pam Bondi's handling of the Epstein files, June of 2025, Joe Kent's resignation over the Iran war, 2026, October 7th, Hamas attack in Gaza escalation. That's like the original pivotal point that I found. Like, that's when most of these people really flared up with anti-Semitism, anti-Israeli stuff, and all weirdly started talking the same exact language. It was bizarre. And you can check me on that, but that I've checked that a million times. Then, of course, the Epstein document releases. Now, these also are used to frame arguments, as you've noticed. So, for instance, you've seen the way the Charlie Kirk assassination and the investigation into it has been used for framing by Joe Kent, by Candace Owens. They'll say things like, oh, you just believe the Fed slop. Or Joe Kent will say, they kept me from investigating it, they being the FBI. These things all go to anti-establishment type of signaling. Now, Joe Kent couldn't investigate a state-run aggravated murder case. It's just not what the NCTC does, and he knows that. Okay, but they frame it, and they use these events to frame a distrust of the government. If you believe, and then to try to force people into camps. Oh, if you believe the FBI, okay, you must be part of the deep state. I believe in letting, a court case go through if I don't have the evidence. Candace Owens doesn't have any evidence. Joe Kent doesn't have any evidence. They're not privy to it. Okay. And I've worked murder investigations, and it's a lot of evidence that they don't have any. I worked that as a PI for defense teams 9 times. Okay. But they use it for framing. Pam Bondi's handling of the Epstein files. Horrible handling of that. But again, it created yet another pivot point for this network to say, oh, I told you you couldn't trust them. Look, she lied. And the files were there. Seems she lied. Okay, but the game here is, in every government, in every organization, you're going to have some bad apples that do some bad things. I've personally never trusted Pam Bondi. But it doesn't mean I'm going to throw out the entire criminal justice system we have because I don't like the way one AG acted. Because you got to ask yourself, why didn't these people throw that whole system away when we had Merrick Garland? Why were they not saying you can't trust the DOJ after Trump got in and before Pam Bondi became someone they didn't like? See what I mean? This should have been sustained language throughout the Biden administration. We didn't see that from these people. We really only started seeing it when Trump came into office, which is strange because they're supposedly conservatives. But yeah, the way she handled that again gave them more ammunition, and it also gave them ammunition against people that come out of the administration, like Dan Bongino. Okay, now Dan Bongino, I like Dan Bongino. Okay, and I've worked in government. I understand the position he's in. He's sitting there. He obviously didn't want to say he committed suicide, or maybe he believes that. I don't know. What I am saying is that I would definitely, if you don't want to be manipulated, listen to all sides. Don't listen to what these people say about Dan Bongino. Listen to Dan Bongino. Then find someone who works in government. Everyone can find one and say, hey, is this guy right? Does this make sense to you? And they'll probably say, yeah. And again, doesn't mean I'm saying I know him or I know he's being honest. I don't say anything like that without proof and facts in front of me. But I will say I know as much about Dan Bongino's experience as these people do and as you do, which is nothing because we're not Dan Bongino. So you gotta, but they use that as you can't trust Dan Bongino because, oh, look, he was working for that evil DOJ. It's the same way they're saying you can't trust the FBI because, look, Kash Patel is running it, and, you know, they lied to us about the Epstein files. What else are they lying about? Okay. So yeah, you see the way they kind of use these things as like to keep that ball rolling. Joe Kent's resignation over Iran war. It was falsely put out that Joe Kent is the top counterterrorism official in the United States in that position. That's simply not true. I recommend you go to intelligence.gov and look at the way the intelligence community is structured. And just so you know, the NCTC, or the National Counterterrorism Center, I was there when it set up. I was in the intel community when it set up. I had interaction with that agency. They're kind of a processing plant for intel. Like, it comes in, it goes in databases, it's pushed out to relevant organizations but that might need it, but they're not boots on the ground like doing any collection or investigations. It's just not what they do. It's not what they were set up for. It's not what they do. Don't believe me, just literally go to the NCTC website. It has all the different regulations that set it up. It's not in its charter. Okay, they were set up after 9/11 to take down the silos that existed between intelligence agencies to make sure that, let's say, the FBI was investigating, or the FAA was investigating people learning how to fly but not land. Well, now you got a center, okay, hence the name, that can look at multiple sources of intelligence from different agencies and say, oh, we've got that happening here and here, and these 19 guys just came over here according to this agency's records. Let's put this together, get a advisory out. Okay, they're not investigating murders. That's not what they do. But Joe Kent really, in a very dishonest way, and I just heard him doing this on a space this past weekend, he was still carrying that line. And for anyone who's ever worked in the Beltway area or Northern Virginia with any of these agencies, we all know what the NCTC is. Everyone's like, what the hell is he talking about? And then he changed the wording and he said, you know, well, we investigate terrorism, you know, or a terrorist investigation. Well, that wasn't a terrorist investigation. It's a murder, aggravated murder case being handled by the state because murder is a state level crime. The FBI is there because they're there to advise, and they're actually a law enforcement agency who's part of the intelligence community. But the NCTC doesn't have collection ability. They certainly don't have any investigative authority at all. Okay, at all. So I digress. And then October 7th, and see, that's the one I'll never be able to figure out. This is where I think a lot of people got paid, because anyone who took the time to see the horrific, just inhuman attacks upon the Israelis by these multiple terrorist organizations, there were about like 17 different ones, and suddenly turns in favor, or at least against, the victims. I mean, it just spikes after that. That's the thing. It's like everyone's inner racist came out against Jews. Like, and you can, there's a million reports you could go to see this. I will provide them in the Substack. But the point is, like, someone paid some money to get some influencers going, because that sucker kicked off. And I will say this, I think it started on the left with the Soros network, because right after October 7th, you saw Jewish Voice for Peace, Naomi Klein, all your typical Marxists came out like within days with the same signage that we saw for like BLM and everything like that. And then weirdly, as the people in this network or people like this network started going full on anti-Israel, it's almost like the Reds on the left kind of went quiet and let these people handle it. But it's a weird point, and if anyone has any info on why the spike after October 7th, please let me know. It's the most bizarre thing. And then, of course, another pivot point is the Epstein document release. Now, that one is like... I've gone through not all the files, but I found a GitHub that lets me get through them pretty quickly. You know, I know the FBI put out a statement saying, you know, these are the files that aren't part of an ongoing investigation, which should tell you there's ongoing investigations. But you see, the framing's already in place where you don't trust they're telling you the truth. And look, I get it. Like, they lied to us about not having any files, and then they had the files. I get it. But it's what we got now. And it's like, you can attach this. What they've done is like they made it like this cabal, like they're running everything. And I just don't, I just know that's not how the world works. The world works on money, and the world works on energy, and war is fought for resources, routes, and, you know, defense. So, you know, but they frame things this way, and it's something you can be a part of, and you feel like you're part of uncovering the big cabal. I'm not saying there's not a big cabal. What I am saying is that this network is using those things not because they want to find transparency in the Epstein files, not because they really believe that the Israelis are this evil race of people, you know, the same propaganda we've heard for centuries. You know, they anyone that believes that, like Candace Owens nonsense on the Kirk assassination, you know, but I think what draws people in is they become a part of it, and this becomes their reality, and it's hard to let that go. It's hard to say, man, I was really wrong. You actually retool your brain, and a lot of these people, especially Candace Owens, they know exactly how to manipulate a crowd. She's really good at it. She does the thing of the hidden knowledge scam, where like next week it's coming, we're getting close, I have a connection, I have a source, the hidden knowledge scam. Then she does the whole thing of like, you mommy detectives get involved, you know, now they feel they're part of it. And they feel like they're, you know, and it's sad because a lot of people really feel like they're really, part of something. They're really making a difference, and they're not. What they're doing is they're being used as unwitting dupes to basically fracture everyone into camps. And that's the whole point of the Dugin Network. Whether these people realize it or not, the real point that Dugin needs, and he said it, is to get people fighting against each other, to create chaos. Okay? Because you have to weaken the United States from within. It's the same game the Chinese are playing. Okay? Same game the Soros network is playing. So that's the thing, is like, all of these things have caused people to turn on each other who all voted for Trump. They've also caused people to say, I'm not going to vote in the midterms because I don't want to vote for the establishment that lied to us about Epstein and is controlled by Israel. So you see the way they play all this, the way it all works. But it all starts with these key events. They tried to make the J6 pipe bomber one of these. It didn't really pan out. But you'll see there'll be more. Okay, they tried to do it with the, the First Lady when she went up and said, I'm not involved with the Epstein thing at all. I thought, you could see the same network start parroting the same things about that. Okay, and there's a lot more people in this network than I've expressed. And the ones that I know they know what they're doing, they tend to cross-promote. This is an interesting part. I've covered this on another episode. There's something called the Serena Shim Award awards that have given awards and funding to Whitney Webb, Max Blumenthal, The Gray Zone, Jackson Hinkle, Mint Press News, Jimmy Dore, Kim Iverson. Okay, the Serena Shim Award is one of the projects of something called APAC, but not that APAC, the Association for Investments in Popular Action Committees. This is a San Francisco-based NGO that receives funding from, it looks like, Syria. Okay. And they also fund projects like the Syrian Solidarity Network movement, the flotillas, the Greta Thunberg stuff, the Palestine liberation stuff. They fund both sides of all these. Max Blumenthal is actually one of their, Gray Zone is actually one of their projects, which means they call it fiscal sponsorship is what they say they're doing for them. But these people have actually received that award. Serena Shim was an Iranian reporter who was killed in a roadside bomb and was working for Press TV, which is a state Iranian news outlet. All these people have received awards from them. Kind of reinforced for me that they're definitely originators. And then, of course, cross-hosting is the central hub. Tucker Carlson's done this with a lot of people. He's done Ian Carroll. Ian Carroll explodes. He's had Joe Kent on there. Everyone, like these bigger names like Megyn Kelly and Sean Ryan, they get someone on there and then their audience explodes. So I almost call them incubators. Like they take someone who's small and make them big. And I have a bigger, louder network, more capability, covert influence wise. All right. So that is that. Now let's get on to some comments, and I'm going to call it a night. And this will continue on. Sorry about the slides, guys. They were so good. Delete the elite, man. Nettie, I love your participation, but you're saying a lot of stuff. Let me see. Christopher Johnson, Nettie, I live in communist Champagne. NATO is evil. I don't really know, and that's why I didn't want to comment on Whitney Webb too much. My wife's interviewed her a few times, but I got to say that I don't know. I mean, I do know she's very influential, but I don't want to comment on her because I haven't done the research on her. I've only read like one of her books, but she's in there because her messaging on X for certain definitely matched the pattern and the criteria that I set up. So that's why she's there. But I do see a lot of that network quotes out of her. So that's part of the reason she's there. There's another guy too named Ryan Dawson. I think he needs to be fit into this network. So Nettie says, Kim Iverson is someone I don't mind listening to. She has a very wealthy aunt who makes money off of nails. Her background seems sad. I think her parents divorced and she lived with her father. No, you're correct, but I don't care what her background is. I care what she's doing now. What I care about is that she was defending Maduro. I did a whole episode on Kim Iverson. If you go to dailyclout.io and go to investigate everything, I did like 3 hours on Kim Iverson. She is totally, I mean, I'm not even sure who she's working for, but she was shilling for Cuba, shilling for Venezuela, shilling for Maduro, shilling for Syria and Assad, shilling for the Chinese, saying that, oh, they had to lock up. I mean, Kim Iverson, in my opinion, is so bad. Like that guy Destiny, who I can't stand. I think he's pure evil. He was a little shocked at what she was saying in favor of the Chinese. Like there's this one clip where he's like, yeah, but they locked up 1 million people. She's like, well, what else could they do? These Uyghurs were known to be terrorists. She's like, but they locked up moms and dads and children. She's like, well, I mean, it's only like 10% of them. He's like, that's 1 million people, so it's bad when Destiny is a little shocked by you. And even Ryan Grimm, who was on the Hill with her, he was shocked. He's like, what are you talking about? So Nettie, I would definitely go back and you should see my episode on that. It's pretty shocking. She also, yeah. And she's, don't feel too sad for her. She's married to like one of the most powerful lawyers in LA. And her real last name is Rasher. But yeah, so I wouldn't feel too bad for her. She also platforms a lot of these people, a lot of them. And then she also did things like, she does those nasty things. Like she went after like Tim Pool, who hosted her, I thought, very graciously a couple of times, and just out of the blue, like started calling him this and that. And I just don't like that stuff, but it's a free country. Autumn Smith. Hey, good to see you, girl. Project Esther, being anti-Zionist isn't the same as anti-Semitism. I'm anti-1948 created. Well, you bring up a good point. I'm not saying it is, but what I am saying is for a lot of people in this network, it starts with anti-Zionism and it morphs into straight up anti-Jew. And we've seen that with most of these people. And I'm sorry if like, for instance, like Tucker did the whole special on Chabad, which I go to Chabad all the time. I love Chabad. I'm not even Jewish, and I've gone to a lot of them. Like I'm sorry, but his comments are definitely anti-Jewish when he's telling people, make sure you know where your Chabad is so you don't get, because they're dangerous. Those kind of things are straight up anti-Semitism. So, and then Candace Owens, I don't even know where to begin with her. She's won the Anti-Semite of the Year award, and I used to think that was some left-wing propaganda, but no, it was pretty anti-Semitic. So I agree with you. You can disagree, and by the way, I don't disagree with Zionism at all. Okay, at all, and anyone who's calling for like Palestine to have their own homeland, but is against Zionism, that's kind of hypocritical. Okay. But so I'm pro-Israel, I'm pro-Jewish, and I am pro, Zionist totally. Okay. Does it mean I like everyone in their government? No. Does it mean I trust every Israeli I meet? No. I don't trust every American I meet. I don't trust every MAGA I meet. But they are our best ally in the Middle East, and I've always enjoyed working with them when I have worked with them. And I know their history well, and I'm sorry, but like, for all the things that people say about Israel, it's gives all the people in their country the most rights of any people. And yes, I've been there. Okay. And more than once. And I'm sorry, but even if you're an Arab living in Israel, your life is a lot better than it is living under Hamas and living under, most of these other countries' rulerships. So, but yeah, I agree. You can be anti-Zionist, but it's a slippery slope, and especially with these people. I'm not saying you can't be. I'm just saying, I don't know, Autumn, I know what you're saying. I know you well too. I'm exposing multi-jurisdictional sextortion ring being run by Eric. Well, no one's paying me either. Actually, I need to bill my wife for the show. I haven't billed her forever. But I will promote you, Autumn, on a different format, but I can't promote you on the show because we're going to do a show about what you're working on. So I don't want to confuse people who are just getting on. So I will put it up, but let's talk about your thing on a different show. Because Autumn's been working on something very important, but I can't promote yours, and then everyone will be doing that. So, but as promised, we will do a whole show. You just got to tell me when you're available so we can set it up. But Autumn is a field reporter, independent journalist for a long time. We've known her a long time. She does great work, and you should definitely check out her work. And we'll do a show for that. So I see it in the chat, but I will put it up another time. And then you said, yeah, okay, well, you know what, Autumn, you're a good friend. So there you go. Check out Autumn's work at fafojustice.com, and then follow her on Twitter. Autumn, go ahead and pop up your Twitter account for me, because it has a lot of numbers in it, and I can't look it up right now. And then I'll put that on the screen for you. But like I said, get on the show so we can promote this. I think you're doing very important work. And by the way, people, you're doing it for the right reasons. You didn't start doing this to get paid. You're actually doing this for justice. So the reason I do this show is for two reasons. Because I hate something called I guess you could call it the ex-Intel grift. So you got all these people that get out of the CIA and stuff like that. And they start telling people things that just aren't true. But who the hell's going to call them on it? Because unless you've worked there, you don't know. And that drives me crazy. It drives me crazy when Green Berets get on and are talking about things that Green Berets aren't trained in as if they were trained in them. And I'm picking on Green Berets because I used to be in 2 special forces units and I used to give them shit about like knowing everything. And, you know, and I have a lot of good friends that are ex-Green Berets, both on X and everything, but they know what I'm talking about. There are always some Green Berets that are like, oh yeah, man, you know, I know this and this and this. We're all good at something. I'll just put it that way. But there's no one that's good at everything. But the Intel grift is those people that worked in like CIA, NSA, those kind of things. And they will just say anything and no one can call them on it because how could they know? Okay. Well, I call them on it because I do know. You know, it's like, and I have the experience and a lot of it. It's just tough to call them out as well because you don't want to violate any sort of, you know, classification regulations. So I'm always careful the way I call them out, and I never call them out on the fly. But I can listen to these guys and tell you yes or no if they work somewhere. I think Emerald Robinson, she has this guy on, is supposedly ex-CIA. I can tell you right now the guy was never in the CIA. At best, maybe he was a security guard, but that's about it. Long story. But I want to do a whole show on like the ex-Intel grift because like so that's one reason I do it. The other reason is I research stuff all day. I do have a company where we do research and litigation support for some big clients. And every now and then I will get an interesting story that I want to share with you because it overlaps into what's going on in the geopolitical space. So I am able to take some things from that. And I try to take on cases that are kind of like with the current news cycle as well. The first job I did for that firm was actually looking into the is when the Roe v. Wade thing happened. I got hired by a big firm to like really look into the roots of all the violence that was happening at these pro-abortion rallies, like Ruth Sentis and everything. That's how I got into this. And I guess as a third reason is just, you all know, anyone that does research all day, it's really good to get it out of your head. Either write it down in a Substack or put it here. And then I guess the fourth reason is you guys are my interlocutors. I've changed my position many times where if you're researching in a vacuum, you think you have it down, but then people present good arguments. And that's why I like really this crowd, especially you guys, because some of the smartest people out there and hitting me with some good questions sometime. That's why I don't bother with like the trolls, because I want to make this space for you. And that's why it's investigate everything, because we're all investigating everything. So Nettie, you're a new one. I really think you should come back. And they're not all criminals, by the way. They're not all criminals. Some good people in all of our agencies. Our agencies are only as bad as whoever is running them. So remember that. There's some really good people across our intelligence community and our law enforcement. Even in the FBI, you know. So I've got my son plays football and his friend's father is an FBI guy, and it was tough during the Biden time, but yeah, he's a nice guy, you know. It's like they're not all bad. Well, just so you know, they're not called agents, they're case officers. Just so you know, there are no agents of the CIA, but that's cool. How do you know they're a CIA agent? Why'd they tell you, Nettie? Aren't they going to get in trouble? Or maybe you're the CIA agent, or maybe they're KGB pretending to be CIA. I'm just messing with you. He sent you the info. Well, send me the info. I want to look at it. I said, send me the info. I said, maybe he's KGB. I was just messing with you. So, all right, guys. Well, there. I gave you a good run on the Dugin Network. Let's review really quickly. You have a network that basically their goal is to, I mean, their goals might be different, but Dugin's goal is to basically get people in America to accept this multipolar vision of the world, to put domestic pressure on our leadership to pull the plug on the war in Iran, to pull the plug on our grand strategy of being in control of the world's oil, gas, and energy supply. No, that's not where I'm at. I don't want to share power. I want us to be the most powerful country in the world always, because I trust our country more than any of those other countries. And I don't trust those countries at all. Do I trust everyone in our government? No, I'd be a fool to. But I trust the fact that our country, of every country in world history, ours has done more for humankind and civilization. We're just a good damn country. Okay? Got our flaws? Sure. Broken a few eggs? Of course. But we're the best country that's ever been around, and I will always stand by that. And we've given more to the world than most countries. And we're going to continue to. And trust me, without the United States, this world is going to dark green and red really quickly, and it's going to be a bad, bad place. Worse than it is now. And for those that really seem to think they hate the United States, I really challenge them to live somewhere else. Because when I used to speak in Eastern Europe, spoke from Montenegro to Georgia to Ukraine even, with a libertarian organization, I would talk to those kids and I talked to their parents, and they were horrified. They were like, why are American youths and students even messing with communism? It's terrible. Or why? And they all love America. And every country I go to, and I go overseas all the time, even in Portugal. We were just in Portugal like last spring, and some guys trying to buy my Donald Trump hat. Like they love America. And I always tell people, I'm like, oh, if America's so bad, how come every country in the world is trying to press through our borders? You see what I mean? So if you've never lived anywhere else and you just hate this country, you should probably leave. If you've lived in other crap holes, like I haven't lived in them, but I've been stationed in them. I've had a good comparison. And why do I say this? I say this so you don't, so you know what your azimuth is. Like, you need to know why you love this country, to love this country, and to fight for this country. But if you don't have a reason for loving this country, you could get really easily manipulated. It's like they say, those, people that believe in nothing are the easiest to manipulate. So, and I also recommend that if you're not sure what they're saying is true, that's when you have to investigate it. That can get you into the investigation. When something just sounds off. Okay? Don't worry about losing followers or anything like that. Call it out. Don't call it out for me. Don't call it out for America if you don't want to. Call it out for the truth. Because there's nothing worse than BS, and there's nothing worse than watching people like lemmings follow BS because it's delivered really well. So I could go on and on and on, but I won't. I'm going to pick on you really quickly. 10% of the police are honest, 10% are corrupt. The other 80% wish they could be honest. So that's a good quote. Same could be true for the FBI, CIA, and any government agency. And I will say this, Autumn. 20% of all statistics are made up on the spot. Let that sink in. That's a joke. I know an Israeli guy is in intelligence, not very intelligent. He supports vaccine. He called me names for years. Yeah, I mean, look, I will say, to be a military intelligence in our military, you actually do have to score a certain score on the ASVAB. But even in military intelligence, which I was in for 11 years, we always did joke about ourselves, self-deprecating humor. So do you want to know, Nettie, what the military intelligence or MI salute is? If you do, give me a thumbs up and I'll tell you what it is. It's top secret, but I'll share it with you guys. Okay. Or Autumn, do you want to know what the MI salute is? As coming from an ex-MI guy. Okay, Nettie says sure. Okay, the MI salute. I hope you like that. I know it's a Frank Serpico quote. I was just giving you a hard time. Yes, of course. Yep. Okay, so you like the MI salute. Okay, so remember the MI salute. What? And our favorite words were could, would, maybe. Of course, because you never want to get cornered. That was our joke about ourselves. But guys, look, this should teach you, and I hope you guys got something out of this. Like, really, really take a look at, if you want to wrap your head around what's going on with all this counter messaging, all this anti-Israeli stuff, because it's not organic. Yes, you can hate Israel. Yes, you can hate any race you want, but nothing that has such a pattern across so many people of different backgrounds is organic. It never is. Okay, and that's the first thing I noticed. So take some time off social media and dig into this stuff. It's worth it. Okay, it's definitely worth it. I've did find a way to order Dugin's books. I'm about halfway through them. It's a lot, but I'm reading everything I can because I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. But it'll get really interesting on the show when I start showing you how the Dugin networks are battling with like the Soros networks, and it's pretty crazy. It's like Clash of the Titans. So if you didn't see the last show I did, watch the opener for it. But I kind of framed it, and I had someone generate an AI video for me where it's kind of like Greek mythology right now. If Soros and like the Dugin Putin people, and the Chinese government and Trump and all the other state sponsored, they're all like the gods, on the mountaintop. And then they have their champions on the ground, their Achilles, their Hercules, and fighting the fight. And then there's the rest of us that just are at the mercy of what's going on. Well, in this case now, we don't have to be at the mercy completely because, our Prometheus fire is definitely, the ability to reach anyone in the world with our message. And they're trying to take that away, but use it while you got it. Okay. And we can turn this fight in the direction it needs to go. And that is, in my opinion, a good America first. I'll just leave it at that. So how can intelligent people, doctors, do what they do? They kill babies, they poison babies, they get big bucks for doing it. It's a lot of reasons, Nettie. We can't get into it today, but there's a lot of reasons. And I can say that most of the time things are so compartmentalized, people don't know what they're doing. Okay. You usually have to be pretty high up that money food chain to know what you're doing is wrong. A lot of times people just think, okay, my job is to wheel out this bag of bio waste and throw it in the dumpster, but maybe they're throwing bodies away. It's just like, I don't think everyone does things wittingly, or realizes what's at the end of it. Good example is like when I worked in intelligence, one of the reasons I got out was because I hated not knowing what the results of my product were. So for instance, I had assets collecting on a certain thing. Those went into a report or a cable. I hit a button that went into somewhere, into the ether. But you can't tell what part you played in this world event. It just doesn't work that way because everything is compartmentalized. So I can't speak for everyone, but speaking for myself, to this day, I'll never know if intel or operations I did were good or bad because I don't know what they were used for. Everything, mine was a part of a larger package. So it's hard to tell sometimes. I guess I'll put it that way. Yeah, and Nettie, we've done, I didn't do a lot of the vaccine stuff. My wife has, but yes, there's a lot of doctors that did. But keep in mind too, you said the inserts here, some of the earliest inserts didn't have any writing on them. And we did a presentation in Michigan and it was like blank. So we don't know. What I would say is some people know, some people don't. I'm not shilling for anyone, but like Autumn does, find those people that are definitely guilty and focus on them and then move on to the other one. Just take out one at a time. But anyways, and then Daddy's sake, I figured it out about 30 years ago. I am not intelligent. Of course you're intelligent. Of course, if you figured it out, you must be intelligent. You have to be intelligent to figure out that you're not intelligent, which means you actually are intelligent. So you might not be that intelligent because you figured it wrong. Okay, I'm going to stop. All right, guys. So I'm talking about child. I hear you, but it's not my topic. I can't really speak on vaccines because I don't really know that much about them. I just know that I'm not ever taking a COVID vaccine. I've gotten vaccines, but they're bad, and I know they. It's part of the teams that wrote the books, but it's not really a topic I can go at this late at night. But definitely go to dailyclout.io and check out all the vaccine reporting they've done for the last 6 years. It's pretty amazing. So guys, with that, Autumn, I saw check your email. Let's compare schedules and do a show. You got it. It'll be next week, but you got it. Okie dokie, good. All right, well, you guys have a great night. It's a late one. And sorry about the slides, but keep sending me in this stuff. And by the way, your homework, if you want it for the Dugin Network, wait till the next big event. Okay, and I do have an outro, by the way, for you. Wait till the next big event, and like some big world event that will happen that will benefit Israel or benefit the United States, or not benefit, the Iranians or something like that. And then watch the way people in this network react to it and record it. You'll see they're all marching to the same drum. And I do have an outro kind of video here for you. And you remember the strategy I talked about. It does appear to be going our way. So I want to leave you on a high note. And the high note I'm going to leave you on, let me see here. Yes. Is all those things in that strategy, they seem to be playing out. Things do seem to be going our way. We know China's freaking out. Russia's reaching out to them saying, we got you, bro. We got you some oil. Well, guess what? You don't. Because looks like we're going to be doing joint military exercises in the Malacca Strait because we just signed a big deal with the Indonesians for basically cooperation. And for the people that were worried about Turkey, attacking Israel, well, guess what? We signed big cooperation with the Greeks that goes all the way out to Crete. And that's great for the Greeks, bad for the Turks, who have been really trying to get at all those resources underneath the Mediterranean. So there's some really good chess here. I don't care what people say. This administration, they're playing some chess. They armed Greece to the T, in November, and that kind of limits what Turkey can do. They just did a deal to basically do military exercises in and around the Strait of Malacca. Well, that kind of cuts off Russia trying to get oil down to China. There's some good moves here going on. I don't care what anyone says. We took out Venezuela, got their oil, and just before the Iran thing kicked off, which helped us control oil prices globally. And then, you may not know this, but Marco Rubio was just down in Guyana, which is just next to Venezuela, and a hot contested spot for oil and natural gas as well. So lots of things moving on that chessboard. So, and as far as, the Pope thing that everyone's talking about this week, let's not forget who this Pope is. And go back to when this Pope came in, look at Autumn's reporting, look at my reporting. This Pope's got a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm Catholic. Okay, and I can tell you, I don't trust this Pope at all. I think he is China's puppet, plain and simple. There, I said it. All right, guys, I'm going to leave you with this outro. It is positive. And thanks, Nettie. I enjoyed the chat too. Let's get this up.
Strategic analyst General Keane has.
All right, so these are the latest updates. It's sad that you have to dig for good news on this, but I think they line up, and I really hope that arch gets built in DC. You'll see it at the end of this. With that, I'm going to let you go. It's been Brian O'Shea, Investigate Everything, and I will see you soon. All right, talk to you later, and thanks everyone for coming out.
Always, sir. Thank you for coming on. Is the war almost over? And how does this blockade, which I think is going to be very effective, sir, really killing them on the economy and finance and maybe starving the regime out, but how does the blockade play into the end of the war?
Yeah, very significantly. I don't think we can overstate exponentially how dramatic this impact is on the Iranians. I mean, I really thought we should have done it as soon as they took control of the Straits, but we're here, and that's the important thing. We are executing it. And the reality is, I do think we're likely here on the cusp of some kind of beginning to terminate. And by that I mean, when you look at it, we hold to the deadline, and that's coming within a week. They know we're going to come back and hit them militarily. That's number one. Number two, the longer the blockade goes, frankly, they do the numbers themselves. That forces total economic collapse for them. They can't handle that, nor do they want to return to military combat operations. So the terms of discussion, I believe, with our negotiating team when they were in Pakistan the last time, the blockade was not in place. They should completely change now. And by that I mean, we want everything. You surrender everything to us. By the deadline, you make a commitment to that. And that means everything, just as President Trump has said before. We make zero concessions to these guys, zero. And we don't throw them a lifeline, as I think we were discussing before, to release frozen assets. The minimum amount I've heard is $27 billion. It's likely bigger than that. Obama, remember, gave him about $100 billion. And we don't do sanction relief. We don't do any economic lifeline to you until way down the road and you prove to us that your behavior has changed. The only term that we're going to grant them in the deal now should be the only accommodation, and take out of the vernacular any thought about face saving for the Iranians. That should not be in our thoughts, and it certainly shouldn't be in our actions here. And the only thing that we're saving them from doing, I mean, the relief we're providing them, we're not asking you to sign a surrender document. And if we kept the blockade on, believe me, that would get to that point. And we're not going to continue to kill you. That is our concession. And that's all the concession should be, in my mind. Yes, we're getting closer to it, Larry, because of they can't not withstand the impact of the blockade. And they certainly don't want us returning to combat.
No, I know, and I wish it happened earlier, but it happened. I thought it was a brilliant ploy by the president, reversing the whole term. I mean, in effect, you're describing unconditional surrender. They don't have any position on anything. They have no foothold on anything. They do what we want them to do. And I'm happy to have this blockade go on for a bunch of weeks, General Keane. You know, they can talk, yap, and pack. I don't care. Let it go on. But basically, let the blockade, it's going to take effect. They're going to run out of they won't be able to meet their payroll, all right, for all these thugs and the IRGC and so forth and so on. Let me ask you something that has come up. President Trump has mentioned this in one of the interviews. The issue of turning over what he calls the nuclear dust, the enriched uranium. We'd like to see that. That was in one of our documents, I believe, the last go-around in Pakistan. Is that possible? I mean, it seems to me that would be important. We know where it is. I think it's the Isfahan nuclear area. But what do you think about that?
That should be the first thing. Commit to open the Straits of Hormuz, and you have no control, no leverage over it, and invite us in as soon as possible. You know, send anybody else you want to send with us in there, but we're coming to take it just like we did in Libya. That should be item one. And I think we're on the cusp of it.
And then the last thing, sir, is how do we really get regime change? How do we get the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps out altogether? I mean, we may be at the fourth level, but there's still a bunch of thugs, as you know, you have told me many times, with names and so forth. I mean, where's the regular army here? How do we get a civilian governance?
Well, if they suffered economic collapse and they had difficulty meeting the payroll of the hundreds of thousands of people that are working for them, that certainly begins to fracture them. After all, if you want to change the political order and you want to guarantee that, the only way you can do that is to physically take that away from them. And that's boots on the ground. And we've showed, and we have examples of doing just that. And obviously we know how to do that, but we made a commitment that that was not going to happen because we thought that we can change their behavior for sure without having to take that risk, that decisive step, and accept those kind of casualties. And I think we're on the path to doing that. You know, we don't know for sure, but the pressure on this regime.
The point is that it's the end of something. Whatever that religion is not going to continue. It just won't, because it's a lie. And so it will end, as all lies do. It will be revealed as a lie, as all lies are. And so you're watching the end of the global American empire, the unipolar world, that was great, by the way, while it lasted, but it's over. And you're watching the end of whatever American Protestant Christianity, one of the greatest and most positive forces in the history of this world, whatever it became after the Second World War, which is something unrecognizable. The point is that it's the end of something. Whatever that religion is not going to continue. It just won't, because it's a lie. And so it will end, as all lies do. It will be revealed as a lie.
Is the honor of a lifetime. Of a lifetime. I am filled with serving as the United States Ambassador to the Hellenic Republic is the honor of a lifetime. I am filled with gratitude for the trust my friend President Donald J. Trump placed in me and for the incredible embrace the Greek people have shown me since my arrival. In my first 100 days in Greece, we have moved swiftly and with a clear sense of purpose, bringing the United States-Greece partnership to historic heights. We broke records at the Partnership for Transatlantic Energy Cooperation Ministerial last November, which included the largest ever official United States delegation to Greece, including 2 cabinet secretaries, my dear friends, Secretary Doug Burgum and Secretary Chris Wright. At PTEC, we signed the first ever long-term commercial agreement, linking U.S. LNG suppliers to the region for decades to come. I also welcome 2 major energy milestones, ExxonMobil's partnership with Hellenic and Energean for the first offshore drilling in 40 years, and Chevron Hellenic Energy winning a bid for offshore exploration blocks, including 2 near Crete. The United States and Greece signed a path-breaking economic security declaration, committing our 2 nations to work together as we explore new technological horizons, including in artificial intelligence. And last fall, I joined Prime Minister Mitsotakis and President Zelensky for the historic signing of an agreement that will bring American energy up through the vertical corridor into Ukraine, where it is desperately needed. These achievements are significant and they are historic. They are also just the beginning. In these first 100 days, if they tell you anything, it's that under the leadership of President Trump, the United States aims big and we deliver. From my first moments in Greece, I have felt the hospitality for which Greece is famous. From carrying the Olympic torch beneath the Acropolis to experiencing the spiritual heart of Thessaloniki at St. Demetrius Church, these first 100 days have already given me memories that I will cherish for a lifetime. There is so much more ahead. 2026 is a very special year for the United States as we celebrate Freedom 250, the 250th anniversary of America's independence. To mark this moment, here in Athens, the very birthplace of democracy, is an extraordinary and humbling responsibility. We hope you will join us on this year-long journey. I am inspired by what we have achieved so far, but the world is shaped not by what we say today, but what we choose to do tomorrow. Guided by optimism and a shared sense of purpose, let our two great nations continue to work together in partnership to strengthen our economies, bring greater security to the region, and bring our people closer together. Thank you. God bless you, God bless Greece, and God bless the United States of America.
Records. And so when you look at where our nation...
For the administrator, I know that there are orders and shipments of factory equipment. They are at record highs. How many small businesses has the SBA assisted with loans and supports, with loans to support them?
Well, the SBA set an all-time lending record last year of $45 billion under President Trump, because small businesses now have access to the capital that they need to build in America. Again, we are becoming a nation of builders, and we see that on the ground. Factories expanding. As a result, we have record PMI, which is Purchasing Managers Index, manufacturing expansion, 2 consecutive months in a row of export records. And so when you look at where our nation has come in terms of export-import imbalance, it's been unfair to the American worker and to American industry, and we're reshoring whole industries because of this tax bill.
Libby,
Libby, go ahead. Thank you, Caroline. I have 2 questions for you. The first one is about Iran. The second one's actually about United Airlines that I want to ask you about. So on Iran, is there a timeline for how long this blockade is going to remain in place in the Strait of Hormuz by the United States that President Trump has voiced to you or that you've heard among officials?
Sure. I will never set timelines on behalf of the President of the United States, but with respect to the blockade, as you know, it has been fully implemented, and it's being enforced against vessels of all nations entering or departing Iranian ports. I want to make that point clear. I've seen some misreporting on that as well. This includes all Iranian ports on the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. And our U.S. forces in the region are supporting the freedom of navigation for vessels that are transiting the strait to and from non-Iranian ports. So I know some in the press were confused about that. We are supporting the freedom of navigation, just not with respect to any tanker or vessel that would benefit the economy of Iran as these negotiations continue.
And then on United, so there was reports that the CEO of United proposed a merger with American Airlines. This would affect tens of millions of Americans. That was proposed in a meeting with President Trump. Was that a merger that he has voiced any kind of support of?
It's not anything that we have a position on or anything we're commenting on. I know it's an idea that has been proposed by private industry, but it's not something the President or the White House have an opinion on or are weighing in on at this time. John, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. This is for Secretary Bessent. On Monday of next week, importers can start requesting claims for tariff refunds. And my understanding is $127 billion eligible for refunds. What's that process look like? How can a porter and an importer request such a refund going forward?
That's not being run out of Treasury. We would just be the paymaster. So that's being run out of CPB. Yep.
And so explain that process. I understand you're not running it. How does that process actually work? If you're an importer, you paid these tariffs, the Supreme Court found that those tariffs were illegal. What's the process for them to get back that money?
Well, they would be in touch with the CPB, and I think the number you're quoting is so that's the amount who have already requested refunds, so they are already in the chute, and we'll see what the timeline is for that.
Will that affect the U.S. economy, all of those refunds coming out of the U.S. Treasury?
We'll have to see what comes out, and we'll have to see for long-term gain.
Voters with high gas prices that ahead of the
question for Secretary Bessent.
Danny, go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, you were quoted as saying in an interview earlier this week that it was worth a bit of economic pain for international security. Is that this administration's message to American voters with high gas prices that ahead of the midterms this year that it's worth the economic pain?
Well, the message is the short-term volatility for long-term gain.
That's right. And Danny, if I could add to that, you know, the president's been very clear, again, as the secretary just said, this is a short-term disruption for the long-term strategic goal of the United States to ensure that the world's leading state sponsor of terror cannot obtain a nuclear weapon. That's a good thing for the American people. That's a good thing for people all over the world. And as the president and his economic and energy team have repeatedly stated, as soon as the operation and now the negotiations with Iran conclude and the strait is reopened, we do expect gas prices to decrease. And thank goodness we have a president and an administration that believes in American energy dominance in bringing down prices at the pump. Look at how gas prices decreased over the past year since this president was in office. It's a stark contrast to the previous administration and Democrats in this city who believe in hampering our domestic energy industry, who believe in importing our most precious resources, who believe in implementing policies that created the worst inflation crisis in history. So President Trump has built the greatest economy in the world before. He is doing it again. Of course, we have this short-term disruption, but again, it's for the long-term strategic goal of ensuring that these terrorists cannot possess a nuclear bomb. Jennifer.
First Secretary Bessent, on the Russian oil, I know the sanctions waivers have expired, but how much money did Russia benefit from that temporary sanctions rules? You initially said about $2 billion. Is that?
It could have been $2 billion. We don't know. But again, it's. Let's think of a different world where oil spiked to 150, and they would have made a lot more by doing that, by pushing the Russian barrels that were already on the water. They were going to be sold. They were going to China no matter what. We pushed them to our allies. We helped stabilize the oil price. And as you can see, there were doomsday scenarios. Oil's going to 150. It's going to 200. It's going to $250. West Texas crude for the front month delivery is about $92 or $93 now.
Thank you, everybody. I know we have two very busy cabinet secretaries with us here today. Before we do depart, just one final announcement. As you know, this year we celebrate America's 250th birthday. In honor of this historic occasion, President Trump and the Department of Interior will submit plans for the United States Triumphal Arch, which will be an architectural masterpiece to celebrate our history right here in Washington, D.C. This is a rendering of the Arch for you. Thank you, Peter. It's quite beautiful, as you can see, and this monumental arch will beam at 250 feet tall in honor of 250 years and stand on ground that is currently empty green space in Memorial Circle on Columbia Island, a man-made island in the Potomac River managed by the National Park Service. The United States Triumphal Arch will be outfitted with beautiful artwork and depictions celebrating the success of the American people over our 250-year history and the enduring triumph of the American spirit. Long after everyone in this room is gone, our children and grandchildren will remain inspired by this national monument. Beginning construction this year on the architectural arch is a fitting way to commemorate the 250th anniversary of American independence. Great nations build beautiful structures that cultivate national pride and love of country, and this triumphal arch should be a project that all Americans of all political persuasions can support because it's a monument for every American to celebrate 250 years of our nation's proud history. And again, the plans for this will be submitted tomorrow. We'll have many more announcements with respect to our 250th anniversary in the coming months as we look forward to the 4th of July. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.
Hello, this is Victor Davis Hansen for the Daily Signal. I think we should take another look at the Iranian war, and I would call it a longer view, not the short-term 24-hour news cycle. What's happening right now is the media and the left wing of the United States political on the spectrum, the Democratic Party, and they are a nexus now, a Borg. they react in 24-hour cycles. So anything that looks unfortunate from the point of the American success in Iran, they cling to. So on last Monday, it looked like Donald Trump, after his tweet on Easter that he was going to end the civilization of Iran, and I mentioned before he meant the regime, the theocracy, the civilization of radical Shia jihadism in Iran, they wanted to impeach him. They said he was a warmonger, a Hitlerian figure. The next day, he announced that negotiations would take place, and then he was a Taco, a Neville Chamberlain, a George McGovern, a Jimmy Carter. Trump always chickens out. But it's indicative that they don't look at the war empirically. They look at it entirely in political terms. In fact, people as diverse as Tom Friedman or Bill Kristol, if you collate what they have written, they almost feel that anything that happens negatively in Iran might be positive because it would hurt Donald Trump, and then therefore that would be in the long-term interest, forgetting that we have 100,000 soldiers in the theater risking their lives, and they're risking their lives to eliminate the real opportunity, the real likelihood that Iran could get nuclear-tipped missiles very quickly, not just aimed at Western Europe, but in 2 or 3 years, perhaps the United States as well, given the participation of North Korea, China, and Russia in their arms industry and their agenda. So we have to look at the long version. And the long version is the only way we can do that is look at history. And history says it's very unusual that one side has been so victorious in an asymmetric war, especially against the strongest power in the Middle East by all accounts. 93 million people. A huge territory, and people were terrified of it. Not just the Gulf monarchies, but the Europeans. They de facto, we say the strait was open before the war. Yeah, it was open, but it was open on the conditions that Iran would close at any minute or could make things difficult. Prior to this closing, it had closed it in 1980, 79 and 80, and again in 2019. And it threatened to do it on many occasions. It's not going to be able to do that when this war. So if you look at it realistically, very quickly, they don't have a military, so to speak. They have lost probably hundreds of billions, if not $500 billion in a half-century investment in missiles, and now in drones, and sophisticated aircraft, in submarines, and capital ships. Their command and control is down to the second and third tier, and no one knows who's in power. We don't know if it's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. We don't know if it's the political class. We don't know if it's the theocracy. We don't know if it's the army. But we know two things, that they are each afraid of each other. They don't want to seem as if they're too compliant, so they want to be as hardline as possible, but we don't know what that really represents. If all of these communiques that are so lunatic may be just intended for internal consumption. The other fear they have, any one of them is looking at these 4 different groups and says, if they cut a deal with the West, or the United States in particular, and there's a transitional figure, and the people take over, we're all going to be dead for what we've done. And so it's a very fluid situation politically. But militarily, it's clear that this has been an overwhelmingly devastating war for Iran. And who are the winners and losers of it? Take Russia. Russia has no presence in Venezuela now. It has no presence in Latin America. It has no presence in the Middle East. Its Assad regime is gone. It had a drone back and forth relationship with Iran. Maybe it's supplying some weaponry across the Caspian Sea we don't know about, but for all practical purposes, that's been severed. It's bogged down in a war with Ukraine. It's lost over 1.5 million people. It enjoys a little spike in the oil prices, and that may help it, but it would be much more likely that they would want to now get out of the Ukrainian war, have some kind of deal, armistice, and then have sanctions lifted off them because they feel that maybe the Strait of Hormuz doesn't have a good future, which turns us to the Gulf itself. The Strait of Hormuz has 20%, not 80%, 20% of the world's oil going through it every day. The Saudis are going to expand their Red Sea pipeline. The Emirates are going to expand their pipelines that serve other countries that are oil producers in the Gulf of Oman. They're talking about going across the desert through Jordan to Haifa. And you could envision in 4 or 5 years, the Gulf might only serve Iran. Instead of being an asset, it could be a liability. If anybody wanted to close it, it would hurt, Iraq and Iran more than anybody else. I mean, Iran has other ports, but it would be an inert asset. And so holding on to the strait and threatening the world means that people are going to find alternative oil supplies. And they're already doing it with the U.S. and Venezuela. And if Russia is smart, it will try to find a ceasefire and join in this alternate supply that's non-Gulf. China has been hurt because it got 80% of all Iranian oil, and that'll be contingent on the United States. It's already contingent whether they get Venezuelan oil on the United States. It won't be sold to them at a discount. They look at the war, and what do they say? What do they see? They see that drones, submarine drones, surface craft drones, aircraft drones, and now the United States has broadcast to the world they're going to acquire, 500,000, 1 million of them. They're late to the party, but when we get riled up and we get activated, we can outproduce almost anybody. And the idea that they're going to go across 110 nautical miles into Taiwan after what they've seen in Iran would be very foolhardy. The United States fleet could sit on the other side of Taiwan, arm Taiwan to the teeth, which they're doing now, and it would be very hard for hundreds of, if not thousands of Chinese shipping to come across that strait without being under a constant fire from a sea of ballistic missiles and drones. Europe is a big loser. We didn't ask all that much of them. We just said supply us by letting us use your bases and your airspace. That was a very modest. They wouldn't do that. The Spanish closed their embassy in Israel, and they kept it open in Iran. For all practical purposes, Spain is a belligerent. France wouldn't let us use its air power. They won't even go into Lebanon, their special post-colonial friend and responsibility, and help get rid of Hezbollah. Britain said they were going to go protect their interest in Cyprus. They have a base that was targeted. They can't even send one destroyer there. Turkey is a NATO member, and what has Turkey been doing? It's been really siding with Iran, and it's threatened to invade and attack Israel, a NATO partner. That's our other NATO partner. Italy, we thought, was a close conservative friend. They wouldn't let bombers land in Sicily. The UK has been the most disappointing. Maybe it'll try to help. It doesn't have much resources anymore. It's sad to say, given the history of the Royal Navy. But my gosh, if we were to say, if we had said to Margaret Thatcher when she asked our aid in 1982 to help in the Falklands, we could have just quoted what Stumer would later say. This is not our war. It's not our war. It's not our war in Serbia. It's not our war in Libya. It's not our war in Chad. So you can see the problem with NATO in name only, and it will be a bilateral. It'll be a bilateral alliance, I think, more and more, that the United States will pick and choose which NATO members that it will fully work with, because the rest are either neutral or hostile to the United States. And finally, the United States, if this war ends in 2 or 3 weeks, it'll still be 7 months for the economy to recover, and the oil will start flowing out of the Gulf, and more importantly, Venezuelan oil, American oil, and even perhaps Russian oil will get on the market to capture these high prices, and people will avoid the Gulf as much as they can, and the Gulf will be opened one way or the other. And so there's a good chance that the economy can return, and there's a better chance that people will come to the realization after this 24-hour hysteria and media cycle and left-wing fanaticism is over. When they look at the situations empirically, they're going to say, my gosh, Iran is not threatening the Middle East. My gosh, they don't have a ballistic missile threat. They do not have an immediate avenue to get nuclear weapons. They have no military. Their entire command and control has been wiped out. Their population is furious. It's stewing. This could be like the fall of the Berlin Wall, which not the next day, not the next week, not the next month, but within months, or in the case of the Soviet Union, within 2 years, you could see a regime change. So the United States is in a good position, especially because we chose not to fight on the conditions that we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we're fighting house to house in Taji or Fallujah, or we don't know who's friend, who's the enemy in a village in Afghanistan. Now, this was fought on Western American terms, and the asymmetry shows it. So we don't know what the ultimate prognosis of this war is, but if we take the long view, it's far more favorable to our interests than it is our enemies. Thank you very much, Victor Davis Hanson, for the Daily Signal.
Next month with President Xi. I want to get your take on China and how this shift in oil, particularly because of Iran, particularly because of Venezuela and what you've done, even your comments on Cuba. How does that change the dynamic of this meeting with President Xi?
I don't think it does. I mean, he's somebody that needs oil. We don't. He's somebody I get along with very well. He just wrote me a beautiful letter.
He wrote you a letter?
Yeah, he did. He responded to a letter that I wrote because I had heard that China is giving weapons to, I mean, you're seeing it all over the place, to Iran, that China's
Did he say
giving
he's
weapons.
giving them?
Yeah, and I wrote him a letter asking him not to do that, and he wrote me a letter saying that essentially he's not doing that.
Okay. Well, we just heard from the FBI recently that there was a major cyber attack attributed to China. What response is under consideration for that cyber attack?
We do it to them. They do it to us. We do it to them. You know.
Well, when was the last time we did a cyber attack in China?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to tell you that, but we do them. They do us. It's been like that for a long time.
So it's not going to be addressed?
I'll address things, but, you know, it is what it is. Look, China's China. They're never easy, but we're doing great with China. I'm the toughest person in China anywhere in the world. I put on 100% tariff on Chinese cars. We don't have a Chinese car in the whole country. And if you look at Europe, they're being inundated with Chinese cars, and it's killing their car companies, okay? There's nobody tougher than me. Don't forget, I put a 20% tariff on them for what they've done with fentanyl. I put a penalty. I call it a penalty. I put a 45% tariff. I had a 145% tariff where they literally were going to go out of business. Look, there's never been anybody tougher in China than me, but I also have a good relationship with President Xi, and that's a good thing. Remember this, TikTok, billions and billions of dollars, not the biggest thing in terms of China, bigger is the other things I do, but everybody said they will never approve the deal, it's a hard no. President Xi said, it's a hard no, we will never do it. Then American business people got together, paid billions of dollars, and I called up President Xi. I said, you know, be a good thing if you did it, and he did it.